Welcome everyone to the Wicked Psychology Hangout live stream. I'm glad to see everyone again. We are going to continue with the Travis Reinking trial. The overall story is that Travis walked into a Waffle House and shot 8 people, killing 4. He shot around 30 rounds, 15 in and 15 out of the Waffle House. And he had 60 more rounds in his jacket that he could have shot.
Good morning, Detective Summerall. Could you please state your name for the record?
Desmond Summerall.
And could you spell your first and last name for our court reporter, please?
DesmondSummerel.
And you are employed by the Metro Nashville Police Department, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you explain what your assignment is?
My current assignment is I'm a general investigator at the South Precinct Investigations.
And how long have you been in that position?
I've been an investigator since 2016.
And prior to that, what was your position?
I've been with the police department for 26 years.
And can you explain how you became involved in the investigation into the homicide of Akila De Silva, Torian Sonderland, Joe Perez, and D'Ebony Groves?
Yes, ma'am. In 2018, when this occurred, I was on the homicide investigator, one of the 3 homicide investigators out of South Precinct. On that morning, I was called at, I believe, 3:44 a.m. by my supervisor. I was advised that there had been a shooting, so I needed to come in. So I responded, and I arrived on scene, I believe, at 4:45, about an hour later.
And once you arrived on scene, what was the first thing that you did?
The first thing I did was meet with my supervisor and got briefed on basically what had happened, and it was determined that I would be the lead detective on the case.
And as the lead detective, does that mean that you're the only detective for Metro Nashville Police Department assigned, or how does that work?
No, for homicides in the South, we had 3 detectives that worked mainly homicides and death cases. So at that time, I would just be the lead, and the other 2 would assist me for the homicide investigation part of the case.
And the other 2, would that be Detective Clarer and Detective Derry Baltimore?
Yes, ma'am.
And kind of those first moments at the scene, what's the first thing that you do?
The first thing I normally do when I got there was observe the crime scene. Of course, everything had been secured by that time. Forensics was already there, and they were already starting to process the crime scene. I didn't go into the Waffle House. I stayed on the outside of the Waffle House. I did observe the 2 victims who were outside the Waffle House in the parking lot. Spoke with some of the officers that had arrived first. All the witnesses had been, their information had been taken. I was notified that 3 victims had been transported to Vanderbilt and 2 victims to Southern Hills Hospital.
And so you're not talking to any of the victims or witnesses or anyone that was inside the Waffle House at the scene? There
No,
are
ma'am.
other officers that are getting their information and getting kind of whatever the brief statements that they have at that moment are.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
And at some point, do you view the surveillance video from the Waffle House?
Yes, ma'am.
And when does that happen?
That would be after I initially got to the scene and found out everything that happened. Myself and Detective Clare went to the Southern Hills Hospital first to speak with Mr. Shaw and Miss Shaw.
Okay.
After speaking to them, we came back, and that's when I was able to view the security video.
Okay, so when you speak to Miss Kayla Shaw, who's at Southern Hills Hospital, and Mr. James Shaw Jr. at Southern Hills Hospital, you haven't even seen the video?
No, ma'am, I haven't seen anything.
Haven't been inside the Waffle House? You're just going to kind of get whatever brief information that they have?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you describe your interaction with Kayla Shaw when she was at the hospital, kind of what her demeanor was?
It was real brief because she was in the treatment room, but I was able to speak with her. She was very distraught, very upset, and basically in a state of shock. Both of them were, about what had just happened to them.
And you also spoke with James Shaw Jr., is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that a lengthy conversation?
It was very brief, just for him to give me a brief statement of what happened so I could get an idea of what actually happened inside.
And neither of those interviews were recorded, is that right?
I don't believe so, no, ma'am.
What was the next thing that you did?
Returned back to the scene. When I got back to the scene, I was advised that Mr. De Silva had passed away at Vanderbilt. At that point, I believe the Waffle House manager showed up so he could take us into the side door, which is at the end of the Waffle House, into the office so we could view the video.
And Why was it that he was needed to view the video?
I believe he's the only one that had access to it.
Okay, so it was something where prior to him arriving, you wouldn't have been able to
Right,
view
we couldn't
it.
get to it till the manager got there.
And were you able to view the video at that point?
Yes, ma'am.
And what's the next step in your investigation?
Oh.
And feel free to reference your supplement if needed. I guess after viewing the video, did you have any information related to the suspect?
After viewing the video, I was able to see the vehicle that he pulled up in, that it was still in the parking lot. We investigated the tags on the vehicle to see who the registered owner of the vehicle was. Was able to determine that it was registered to Mr. Reinking. I was able to pull up a driver's license photo of Mr. Reinking, and after comparing it to the video, I was able to fairly confidently determine it was the same person.
So the general description matched.
Yes, ma'am.
Which, in Detective Summerall, that video has previously been played during this trial. It's not a high definition, you can see every single thing that's happening type of video.
No, ma'am.
And did they explain to you why that was?
Well, not really. Just their quality of video at that time wasn't really as good as it is now.
So, I mean, it kind of jumps.
It jumps and just doesn't record everything as smoothly as the ones we have now.
And were you able to immediately kind of search that vehicle, or what, if anything, had to be done at that point?
No, it was determined that due to the circumstances of the crime, we need to have bomb squad come out and check the vehicle for any type of explosives.
And was that done?
Yes, ma'am.
And then what information did you have once the vehicle was searched?
The officer that searched the vehicle was able to tell us that while doing his search with his bomb dog and checking for devices, he saw 2 checks laying on the center console with Mr. Reinking's name on them and an address, which was at 5000 Mountain Springs Road, which is right down the road.
So very close proximity to the Waffle House restaurant crime scene, is that
Yes, ma'am.
correct? And based off of that information, what, if anything, did you do?
At that point, I believe, let's see.
Did you go to the apartment itself?
Not at that point. We were still waiting on, the crime scene to be processed. It was decided that we would do a search warrant for the truck and the apartment the apartment itself of Mr. Reinking. The 2 victims outside were identified as Mr. Sonderland and Mr. Perez. Plus, knowing that Mr. De Silva had already passed away, after speaking with the supervisor, it was decided we had enough probable cause to obtain homicide warrants for Mr. Reinking. So at that point, I left the scene and went and wrote up warrants and obtained warrants for Mr. Reinking.
And that process of obtaining an arrest warrant, that's not something that you can just do remotely. You have to physically go get an arrest warrant.
Correct. I had to come back to the South Precinct, sit down, type out the warrants, then go downtown to the night court commissioner and present the evidence to him.
And so you actually go in front of someone and swear out the
a
warrant.
warrant.
And at that point, once you had the arrest warrants, which you said initially it was just the 3 warrants, because that was the only information.
At that time,
you had
that was the
confirmed.
only victims had been identified. I didn't know, I did not know Miss Grove's identity yet. She was still inside, and we weren't able to go inside yet to the Waffle House.
And that was just because of the crime scene processing process that they go through.
Yes, ma'am.
And so once the arrest warrants are obtained, did you obtain warrants to search the vehicle as well as the apartment?
Yes, Detective Balfour took out or wrote those search warrants and got them signed. So by the time I did the homicide warrants, arrest warrants, and returned back to scene, he had the warrant signed.
Detective Summerall, do you recognize the photographs that have just been handed to you?
Yes, ma'am. It's Mr. Reinking's apartment.
And are those all photographs that were taken that first day when the scene was held?
Yes, ma'am.
Just clarification, yes?
S. I believe they're 19.
Now, a couple of photos toward the end were taken the next morning when we returned. But
They were all taken during the time that the
Correct.
scene was held.
Yes, ma'am.
So the initial photos were taken kind of initially, and then a couple of photos were taken
The next
when you
morning.
came back the next morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask that those 19 photographs be introduced as the next numbered exhibit, which I believe would be 51A through S. And I have those available to digitally publish to the jury with permission of the court.
You may. I think our TV's working again.
Detective Summerall, Exhibit 51A is on the screen. Can you describe what is shown in this image?
This is like the living room area of his apartment. There's a table he's got set up as a computer desk with monitor and several different computers there.
And 51B.
I think this is a hard drive. Oh no, this is a tablet.
And was that collected as evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm going to ask that this witness be handed an item. Detective Summerall, do you recognize that item?
It's a Samsung tablet that was recovered from the house.
And is that the same tablet that it is in the photograph of 51B?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask that that be introduced as the next numbered exhibit, which would be 52.
All right, so then,
The next image is 51C. Could you describe what is shown there?
2 cell phones and some, I believe, some AirPods.
And is that 2 cell phones or a cell phone taken out of a case?
Well, it could be. It's hard to tell on that image. It is a cell phone. I believe the cell phone was taken out and the SIM card was removed.
And is that typical procedure when seizing a suspect's cell phone in criminal investigations to remove the SIM card?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that something that the Technical Services Unit has directed detectives to do?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to ask that the witness be handed an item. Do you recognize the item that was just handed to you?
Yes, ma'am. It's an iPhone 6S.
And is that the cell phone that is shown in Exhibit 51C?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask that that be introduced as the next numbered exhibit.
53.
And Detective Summerall, this is 51D. Could you describe what is shown here?
They have a monitor to the left on the floor. I believe is a tower computer. Also on the desk is a Alienware laptop computer.
And were both of those items seized?
Yes, ma'am.
If the witness could be handed this item.
Yes, ma'am. It's the same laptop computer that's laying on the table there in the picture.
Your Honor, I'd ask that that item be entered as the next numbered exhibit.
54.
And this next image is 51E. Can you describe what is shown here?
It's a backpack, power supply, some other items there. I'm not sure.
Does the power supply appear to be on an Apple brand
Oh, yes, ma'am. It's
laptop,
on an Apple laptop. Yes.
otherwise known as a MacBook?
Yes.
Detective Summerall, I've just asked that an item be handed to you. If you can take a look at that when you receive it and let me know if you recognize it.
It's a MacBook laptop. Same as recovered there.
Your Honor, I would ask that that item be introduced as the next number exhibit, which I believe is 55.
Okay, so we get it.
Which, Detective, were several of the other items, like the discs on the table and other things collected.
Yes, ma'am.
And the next image is 51F. Could you describe what is shown here?
It's just a small home safe.
And what, if anything, was significant or located within that item?
Located in that small safe was a BMW key fob, which
And can you explain what your investigation revealed related to that key fob that made it relevant.
During the investigation, it's found that a BMW was taken from Brentwood, from a Brentwood dealership, stolen by Mr. Reinking, and it had been recovered at the apartment at 5,000 Mountain Springs and towed from there, I believe the previous day before the shooting.
And were you able to verify that that key fob in the safe matched the vehicle that had been stolen by Mr. Reinking on the 17th?
Yes, ma'am.
Detective Summerall, I've asked that you be handed another item.
Man, this is a safe that was recovered from the 5,000 Mountain Springs.
And I would ask that item be introduced as the next numbered exhibit, which I believe is number 56. And Detective Summerall, could you describe what is shown here?
Several types of paperwork and a camera bag, tax documents.
And you are being handed another item.
Yeah, this is the bag that had 3 GoPro cameras with mounts with their memory cards in the camera bag.
And that was
items.
all items that were located within this camera bag shown here on the countertop.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask that that item be introduced as the next numbered exhibit. And Detective, there are various documents on the countertop, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now I'm going to ask that you be handed another item. And do you recognize that item?
This is a folder that contained several sheets of paper with passwords that was recovered from the house.
And the passwords are, how were you able to determine that they were passwords, I guess?
Through Chad Gish, I guess. I'm not sure. Officer Gish.
But opening it up and looking at the documents,
It was apparent that they were passwords.
and were they related to accounts of Mr. Reinking?
As far as I know, yes, ma'am.
And did you collect that from the apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's my understanding there's not a specific picture of it, but it was just found kind of within paperwork.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I'd ask that that be introduced as the next numbered exhibit.
Number 58.
It's a hard drive. Detective, I'm going to back up to 51D. You've already testified that several of the other items from that area were collected. Do you recognize the item that was just handed to you?
It's a Western Digital hard drive, which
And was
was...
that also recovered from the apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask that that item be introduced as the next numbered exhibit. And now we are at 51H. Can you describe what is shown here?
It's the bathroom for that apartment. You can see a magazine that fits an AR-15 type rifle on the countertop.
And the next image is 51I. Can you describe what is shown here?
And this is a rug in the same bathroom, which you could see blood smears on the rug in the bathroom.
And the next image is 51J. I believe you've already described this somewhat.
It's a magazine that fits an AR-15 type rifle.
I am going to ask that you be handed an item.
Yep, this is the magazine recovered from the apartment.
And that's the one that is shown in the photograph, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time I'd ask that that be entered as the next numbered exhibit, which I believe is number 60.
It is and will be so.
Thank you. Detective Summerall, the next image is 51K. Can you describe what's shown in this image?
This is the bedroom of that apartment. Various clothes on the floor, no bed.
But there's a comforter and a blanket and a
Yes, ma'am, on the
pillow
left
and
side,
some
yeah.
stuff. An alarm clock and a lamp. And 51L.
Just a pillow and bedding, period where he'd been sleeping.
And 51M.
It's the closet of that bedroom.
And can you generally describe the items that were found in the closet?
There was several boxes of ammunition, 2 rifles, and some other writings.
And were the ammunition and the rifles collected as part of this investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
And this is 51N. Can you describe what is shown here?
There's a box of 22 ammo, some boxes of rifle ammo, other rifle caliber ammo, and some clothing.
And again, all of that ammunition was collected as part of this investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The item is being handed to you.
This is, I believe, 30-223 cartridges, which is the caliber that was used in the shooting.
And were those collected from that closet?
I believe so, yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask that those be introduced as the next numbered exhibit, which I believe is 61.
This is a box of 22 cartridges,
And you mean 22 caliber, correct?
22 caliber cartridges, yes, ma'am.
Several boxes.
Yes, several boxes, and yes, with 22 long rifle cartridges.
And those were collected from that closet area, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And Your Honor, at this time I would ask that those be introduced as the next numbered exhibit. Thank you. Detective Summerall, you've been handed another item. If you can identify.
These are some boxes of 30-06 rifle cartridges, which is 30-06 caliber of the rifle.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask that that item be introduced as the next numbered exhibit, which is 63. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, ma'am. It's a box of 45 caliber pistol cartridges.
And is it one box or potentially multiple boxes?
I believe it's one box.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask that that item be introduced as the next numbered exhibit. And that last item that was just handed to you, Detective Summerall.
It's more just loose 22 caliber cartridges.
And again, collected from that closet area, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, that could be introduced as the next numbered exhibit, which I believe is 65. Detective Summerall, I have now placed 51-0 on the screen. Can you describe what is shown there?
I believe it's two different rifles.
And at this time, I would ask that the witness be handed Exhibit 37.
The scissors are right there after Dina. Okay.
Do you recognize the item that was just handed to you?
This is a Remington 30-06, which was recovered from the closet apartment.
And was that collected as evidence in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And at this time, I would ask that you open that item so that it can be published to the jury. And is that the item that you recovered from the closet?
Yes, ma'am.
And does that item have the scope on it?
It has a scope. It's a bolt-action rifle, 30-06 caliber.
And are you familiar with how a bolt-action rifle is fired?
Yes, ma'am. It's made to fire one shot at a time. You fire it, then you actuate the bolt, push it forward, pushing another round into the chamber before you can fire it again.
And at this time, I would ask that the item be returned to the box, and it was marked for ID previously, but I would now ask that it be introduced as Exhibit 37. And if the witness can be handed previously marked for identification only, Exhibit 39.
This is the other rifle that was taken from the closet.
And was that collected as evidence in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And at this time, I would ask that that item be open so that it can be published to the jury as well.
All right.
And Detective Summerall, is that the .22 rifle that was recovered from Mr. Reinking's closet?
It is.
And are you familiar with that type of firearm as well?
It is also a bolt-action rifle with a scope on it. It fires the same way. You fire one shot, and you have to actuate the bolt before you can fire another round.
And if that item can be returned to the box, and I would ask that the previously marked 39 for ID only be introduced as Exhibit 39.
So marked.
Detective Summerall, there's an item over here in the right corner of this picture that is somewhat hard to see. Can you describe what that item is?
I believe it's a pistol case.
And was there anything of relevance for that pistol case to the investigation?
If I recall, I believe it was the pistol case that goes to the pistol that was recovered with him when he was located.
The Kimber .45 caliber firearm.
Yes, ma'am.
And if the witness can be handed one last item.
It's two rifle scopes.
And were those also located within that closet?
Yes, ma'am.
And those are obviously separate and apart from the scopes that are pictured and physically on the rifles.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that those two scopes be made the next numbered exhibit, which I believe is 66.
It is. So marked.
And Detective Summerall, this is now 51P. Could you describe what is shown here?
I believe the reason for this photo was the recovery of that cell phone pictured and 2 IDs of Mr. Reinking.
And can you describe what else is shown in the image, just for the record?
Guitar case, I believe another backpack maybe. It's hard to tell, and some cables. 1 chair.
And this is 51Q. Can you describe what is shown here?
It's Illinois' driver's license and a crane operator certification card.
And was that LG cell phone also collected?
Yes, ma'am.
And the next image, which is 51R, can you describe what is shown here?
You have a safety vest, a hard hat, and some torn up paper, and a empty box of ammunition.
And image 51S, can you describe what is shown here?
This is the box of empty ammunition. It is a 200 round box of 45 grain jacketed hollow point bullets.
And those are 223 Remington, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. 45 grain jacketed hollow points. It's like empty box.
And was that collected?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the item that you have is that item that was collected, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I would ask that that be introduced as the next numbered exhibit, which I believe is 6.
Exhibit.
Thank you. Detective Summerall, after you searched the apartment, what is happening next in the investigation? I know you said you went there initially, you went back to do kind of a more thorough search and collect additional items, but in those first hours, there's already been testimony that Mr. Reinking was not located, so what are you doing with your part of the investigation?
After the initial search of the apartment, the search was still ongoing for him. So at that point, I went back to the South Precinct to start on paperwork, filling out offense reports, things of that matter.
And at some point, did you do anything? I know you said you went back to search the apartment. Did you do anything related to the vehicle of Mr. Reinking?
Yes, after searching the apartment the next morning, myself and Detective Baltimore did go to the towing lot where the truck had been taken and went through it again.
And did you collect any additional items from the vehicle?
Yes, we recovered, I believe, the checks, which had previously been seen during the bomb search, and also some receipts from the Nashville Armory.
I'm going to ask that the witness be handed an item. And Detective Summerall, just for the record, this item is actually opened. It's been opened by the parties in the case together,
Yes,
not
ma'am.
in any other fashion. If you could remove the items and identify whether or not you recognize it.
I'll try. It's been stapled again. Have the vehicle registration of the vehicle, so the Chevy Silverado, 2 receipts from Nashville Armory.
And can you describe both of those receipts?
One receipt is a 4/8 of 2018. It's for a magazine, for a 30-round magazine, and also a Kimber, looks like a Kimber 45 magazine. 2 different magazines were purchased.
And what is the quantity on the Hex Mag 30-round FDE mag?
It's 30 rounds.
The quantity purchased?
Oh, 1. Oh, 3. I'm sorry. 3 were purchased of the Hex mags.
And the quantity for the Kimpro TAC mag 8-round 1911 45 caliber ACP is?
1 was purchased.
Okay. And can you indicate the date and the specific time?
The date of this was 4/8/2018 at 3:55 p.m.
And the second receipt from the Nashville Armory that you located within Mr. Reinking's vehicle?
It is a return receipt of the Kimpro TAC 8-round 45 ACP magazine. And that was on 4/9/2018 at 12:10 p.m.
And only that Chem Pro Tac Mag 8-round 19 mag was returned.
Correct.
And what, if any, follow-up did you do once you located those receipts?
We were able to contact Nashville Armory and verify with them that Mr. Reinking did purchase them, and also obtain some video showing him coming into the store and purchasing the items.
And so not only do they have his name in their system, but they actually provided surveillance video, so you verified that it was him that entered and left.
Yes, ma'am.
And did they have any other transactions related to Mr. Reinking, or was it just those two?
Just those to my knowledge.
And Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that the entire item be introduced as the next numbered exhibit. Detective Summerall, were you able to attend the autopsies of the deceased victims in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you describe that?
Sorry. I did attend the autopsies of all 4 victims. First one, this was at 11 o'clock the next day. Mr. Sonderland had received 7 gunshot wounds, which one was a catastrophic wound to his head. Miss Groves had received 2 shots to the left side of her body, which one of the bullets traveled through her heart. Mr. De Silva received 2 gunshot wounds to his right shoulder and arm, and he was believed to have received internal damage and bleeding. And Mr. Perez had at least 4 gunshot wounds to the upper back, neck, and head area, and the wound to his head was a catastrophic wound.
And Detective Summerall, as a homicide detective, do you regularly attend autopsies of your deceased victims?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's something that's part of your daily activities.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there something particularly different about the autopsies of these victims?
I can say this was the most victims I'd ever had at one time in an autopsy.
And once that part of the investigation is done, what's kind of the next thing that's happening in the investigation?
After that, I'd return back to the station, and it was decided I needed to go ahead and obtain an additional warrant for the murder of Miss Groves. And so I started to work on that, at which point I was notified that Mr. Reinking had been apprehended.
And you obviously said that you're a detective at South Precinct. There's been previous testimony that Mr. Reinking was briefly brought to South Precinct. Were you there, and did you observe him?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you describe his demeanor?
He was calm, quiet, relatively normal to everything I saw. He was doing everything asked of him, complying with anything asked of him.
And after that, what, if anything, what was kind of the next step in the investigation?
My next step was just to, at that point, he had been arrested, so start compiling all the information from all the different entities that had been involved, get information from FBI, ATF, bank records, just all the small stuff that had to be done after that.
Do you typically get FBI support in your homicide investigations?
Not normally, no.
And TBI, DA, ATF, is that?
It's normally all on me.
I guess the TBI probably assists more regularly than any other agency and local DEA and ATF, but this was a lot of assistance.
Yes, ma'am.
So is it fair to say that there were a lot of interviews and things happening by other agencies that were being provided to you as part of your investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
And what information were you able to learn about Mr. Reinking? I mean, he has an apartment here. Were you able to determine how long he had been at that apartment?
I believe it was a few months. I did get the apartment contract from the apartment complex, but I can't remember off the top of my head how long he had been there.
Which you actually got a copy of his lease from the apartment complex?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it refresh your recollection to review that document?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, this showed he had started his lease in January, end of January 2018.
And how much was that, the rent on that apartment?
$920 per month.
And it has Mr. Reinking's signature on it, is that correct? For his information.
It has his information on here. Doesn't have his signature.
Were you able to determine, I mean, I guess at this point in the investigation, you're trying to figure out who this person is and I guess why this might have happened.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to locate any friends of Mr. Reinking?
The very first day that it happened, while I was back at the station trying to start my paperwork, I had received a call from a former friend of Mr. Reinking's. I'll give you his name. Mr. Syndrome called and wanted to speak with a detective.
And did he indicate that he had recent contact with Mr. Reinking?
I believe he indicated to me that it had been about 4 years since he'd spoke with him.
Were you yourself able to locate any friends that had regular contact with Mr. Reinking?
No, ma'am.
And what about any employment? Were you able to determine whether or not he had a job?
I believe I did contact the company from the check he had received, and he was employed as a crane operator in Nashville for a short period.
And are you a crane operator? Do you know what that means?
Yes, ma'am.
And I guess, can you explain how you know what that means?
Back in 1989, I joined the National Guard, and I was trained as a crane operator in the National Guard back in 1989 for a short period.
So you have actually operated a crane.
Small cranes, yes, ma'am.
And can you describe, is that a difficult task or an easy task?
It can be a very difficult task, something you have to be on your game all the time. You can't be daydreaming. You have to concentrate. There's so much that goes into it. You have to know how much load you're lifting. You got to be aware of the people around you, what they're doing, what the load you're moving is doing. So many factors of the boom angle, how far you can lift it, how much you can lift, how much it's going to cause the crane to tip over. A lot of it goes into a crane operator.
So that sounds like math, physics, somewhat engineering.
A lot, yes, ma'am.
Complex. And you said that you were able to locate that he had recently worked as a crane operator in the Nashville area.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you, I guess at that point, did you have any victim or witness that was at the scene? I know you have his vehicle, you found his apartment, you have a lot of information, but did you have any eyewitness identification at that point?
I did. The day after, or the third day after, I went to the Vanderbilt Hospital and spoke with Miss Wagner and Miss Henderson.
And Miss Wagner, Shantia, when you went to the hospital, what was her condition?
She was aware, but she was very distraught. Still, she had been through a couple of surgeries, I believe, already, and had to go through several more that were in the future.
And was she able to provide any information related to his identity?
No, she was not. She described to me what happened, but she could not identify Mr. Reinking.
And what about Miss Henderson?
I interviewed Miss Henderson. She was kind of in the same situation. She had been through some surgeries and had more to go through, but she was aware and spoke to me and described what happened to me. And I had asked her, did she think she could identify the suspect? And she indicated to me that she could.
And so what did you do at that point?
At that point, I went back to the precinct, made a photo lineup up, and went back to the hospital and presented it to her, and she picked Mr. Reinking out as being the person who shot her.
And was she certain about that identification?
She said 100%.
And I'm going to ask that you be handed a folder that has a 4-page document. Do you recognize the document that was just handed to you?
Yes, ma'am. This is the photo lineup that was presented to Miss Henderson.
And is her signature on that photo lineup?
I've got it marked that she was unable to sign due to her injuries.
And she was right-handed, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that the four-document photo lineup within the folder be entered as the next numbered exhibit, which I believe is 69.
No.
If I could have one moment. I mean, I can put it there.
Clear it.
Detective Summerall, I just want to clear up a small detail. The lease contract that I handed to you earlier is dated January 2018, is I believe what your testimony was. It's specifically January 31st, 2018, with the lease term beginning February 3rd of 2018.
Yes, ma'am.
And then it says through midnight, February 2nd, 2019.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is that apartment at 409.
That's correct.
Technically, they have a typo on their lease because it says 500 Mountain Springs Road, but we all know it's 5,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so Ms. Henderson was able to make a positive ID.
Yes, ma'am.
Were there various other steps that were taken that evidence processing, of DNA testing and ballistics testing and things of that nature?
Yes, ma'am.
And at some point, did you follow up and try to speak with every person that was in the Waffle House at the time that this happened?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you ask the people to come in and do interviews?
I ended up mostly going out and finding most of the people and going to where they were to interview them.
But did you interview a few of the people at the station?
Yes, ma'am.
And I know that some of the people were not as local as everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Those interviews, were they lengthy interviews, or was it more just to kind of document the information that they had from that 1 minute of
Just
the
brief,
incident?
going over exactly what happened to them, what they saw, real short, nothing lengthy.
And did you follow up in any way related to financial records of Mr. Reinking?
Yes, I believe I did a subpoena, and also the ATF, I believe, provided me some bank records.
And those, did you review those as part of your investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
If I can have just one moment. Detective Summerall, do you see Travis Reinking in the courtroom?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you point him out and identify what he's wearing?
He's a gentleman here with a white long sleeve shirt on, the defense statement.
Thank you, Detective Summerall. I don't have any other questions.
Cross.
Good morning, Detective Summerall.
Yes, sir.
My name's Luke Evans. I'm one of the attorneys for Mr. Reinking.
Yes, sir.
So, if I understood your testimony, you're the lead detective or lead case agent on this investigation, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, according to your responsibilities in that role, it was important that you knew everything there was to know about the investigation of this case. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I mean, obviously you had to rely on the help of others, no doubt.
Yes, sir.
But it was incumbent upon you to review the information and be reported back to with information that was progressing throughout the investigation, correct?
To the best of my ability, yes, sir.
Now, and as part of your responsibilities as a detective, you keep what they call an investigative supplement report to kind of keep your thoughts in order. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That also serves to help you document what information you glean at what time in an investigation. Is that
Yes,
right?
sir.
So, if I understood you correctly, you said that after, I think, getting the information from the truck that had the address, the apartment address on it, is when you actually got the warrant for the apartment and went to Mr. Reinking's apartment to search. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you searched it, I think, a couple of different times. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Right. And when you're searching it, the first time, is that when those pictures were taken that you identified? I guess Exhibit 51A through S, those particular photographs.
The majority of them, I believe I pointed out that 2 of them were taken next day.
Okay. And the point of you going into Mr. Reinking's apartment at that time is to document pretty much everything you see there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And fair to say, you walked in and pretty sparse.
Yes, sir.
No bed.
No.
All right. I think you pointed out to one of the pictures and noted that he appeared to be sleeping on the floor with a blanket over in the corner.
Yes, sir.
Kind of a folding table for a desk, correct?
Yes, sir.
And just so I didn't miss it, I never saw like a couch or anything of that nature in the apartment.
I believe there was a chair. There was no couch, nothing like
And
that.
that chair you're talking about, was that little kind of foldable black chair that was over by one of the, I think probably the balcony door to the apartment?
Yeah, there's a folding chair and also the computer desk chair, whatever you want to call that.
But that's it, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, when we're looking at that, and could I retrieve Exhibit 51, please? present.
It's coming up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to let you see 51D, previously ended in front of C. Okay. Fair to say there was quite a bit of computer equipment.
Yes, sir.
I think you noted 2 separate laptop computers, correct?
There was a laptop, a tablet, the tower computer,
A tower, and then there was a MacBook.
and a MacBook. Yes, sir.
And there was also, is there a microphone on the desk there?
I'm not sure. I believe it. Yes, sir.
That looked like a microphone just to the right of the lamp.
Could be. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, as part of your investigation, you took all that information, not the information, but those computers, all the electronic devices, and you had, I think you noted in your report, you sent those to another division that forensically evaluates those things, examines.
Yes, sir.
Looks at them, right?
Correct.
So they can report back to you and say, here's everything that was on all of those digital devices.
Yes, sir.
And you've reviewed those digital devices as part of your investigation?
I did not review all that stuff. No, sir.
Have you reviewed any of that stuff?
I think I may have saw only one video from that stuff.
What kind
I
of
didn't
video?
go back and look at it. Mr. Reinking was sitting at the desk watching a movie.
Okay.
Videotaped himself watching a movie is the one I looked at.
Okay. And so, but you're saying that's the only video.
Yes, sir.
You have an approximation of how many gigabytes or terabytes or however of digital information was retrieved and forensically looked at by your department?
I have no idea.
Fair to say, a lot, right?
Yes.
And based on the information you've gleaned, there was a significant amount of videos of Mr. Reinking kind of vlogging talking into a camera.
I never saw that. I never watched any of that.
Whether you looked at them or not, are you aware that those types of videos existed on those machines?
I know there was a lot of information on it. I couldn't tell you exactly what was on there.
Okay. GoPro camera, I think you said that was Exhibit 57. You recovered that?
It's recovered, yes.
Right. And a GoPro camera, just obviously, I would imagine the jury knows what a GoPro is, but is that a camera someone can use to?
Like a video camera, to my best of my knowledge. I don't have one, but yeah, used as a video camera to record something.
Yeah. Either themselves or others, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in that camera case that was part of Exhibit 57, you said there was memory cards in there as well?
Yes, sir.
And did you review those memory cards?
I did not.
Is that something that you passed on to your forensic team to have them look at? Or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then Exhibit 59, just to be clear, was a Western Digital hard drive.
Yes, sir.
And that was something else that was turned over to your computer forensic team, correct?
Yes, sir.
So it was your job during this investigation to learn as much about Mr. Reinking as you possibly could. Is that correct?
My job as a homicide detective was to determine who did the crime and if I could get enough evidence to charge him with the crime. That was my initial responsibility. This being probably in that respect, one of the easiest homicides I'd ever had. The weapon was on the scene, the suspect's vehicle was on the scene, and I had video. I don't ever get that in homicide.
Right. So obviously you had the video.
And witnesses.
But you had to take steps to find out who Travis Reinking was, correct?
Well, I mean, I had to figure out who he was to identify him as a suspect, yes.
Sure, like where he was from, right?
Yes.
And during your investigation, you actually were able to locate a Morton, Illinois address for Mr. Reinking. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And as part of that, you were also able to find that where he lived and had lived in Morton, Illinois was part of the Tazewell County Sheriff's Department's jurisdiction, correct?
Yes, sir.
You were asked a little bit about other agencies that had been involved with the investigation for the shooting at the Waffle House.
Yes, sir.
And you, I think, rattled off, there were several
Yes, sir.
federal agencies and otherwise.
Yes, sir.
One of them that I don't know that got mentioned, but the Secret Service was actually contacted, loosely involved in this investigation, correct?
I never had any contact with the Secret Service, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, at some point, you did find out as part of your investigation on how to move forward, determining how to proceed, that Mr. Reinking had been involved in an incident at the White House in Washington, D.C. in August of 2017, correct?
Objection. Objection.
You may.
So again, I'll restate the question. You were made aware that Mr. Reinking had been involved in an incident at the White House in approximately, what was it, August of 2017, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you were going through his apartment and searching it, and it's fair to say, I think you noted it here, you say you located 2 rifles and ammo,
Yes, sir.
correct? A cell phone,
I believe there's multiple cell phones, I think, in the apartment.
and then you say some writings of the suspect.
Yes, sir.
And where were those writings of the suspect?
I believe there were some notebooks found in the closet.
Okay. And a GoPro camera,
Yes, sir.
2 laptops, correct?
Yes, sir.
A tower computer,
Yes, sir.
and we already mentioned the tablet.
Yes, sir.
Now, you also mentioned going back a second time
That's
to the
correct.
apartment. And during that incident, you were able to locate an additional notebook, you say, with the suspect's writing in it, correct?
If that's what I wrote, yes.
And then you found a letter that had been ripped up that you guys reconstructed, right?
Yes, sir.
And that was a letter that, from reconstruction, you could tell that Mr. Reinking had written to Taylor Swift.
I believe so.
Now, I want to go back to this safe. And if you could, the clerk could, pass the witness Exhibit 56.
Yes, sir.
Can you open it for me?
I will.
And if you don't mind, with the court's permission, can he stand up and walk in front of the jury and let them take a look at that?
You need to put that podium out there so we can. You don't want him to open it or anything, or just?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, put the podium out there so we can set it down there.
Now, Investigator Summerall, before you open it, when you were on scene and you opened that safe, I think you described earlier there was a BMW key fob.
I believe so, yes.
But that's not all that was in that safe, correct?
I don't recall.
You recall the key fob, but you don't remember that there was anything else, or whether there was anything else in that
Key
safe.
fob was pertinent to it. I knew it involved the BMW that had been taken from there, so I knew that was more. But I can't recall anything else was in the safe.
So you're saying, from your recollection right now, you can't remember whether or not you opened up that safe and the single solitary thing in that safe was a key fob, or if there was any other item, whether you remember the item or not.
I can't, no, sir, I don't recall what else was in there besides the key fob.
Well, let's find out. So can you hold that up for the jury? Let me ask you this. Did you open it?
I don't recall.
You don't recall if you opened it,
No, sir. It's been 4 years ago. I don't recall.
but you remember the key fob so well.
Yes, sir. It was turned in his property.
Let me ask you this.
Verify that it was a key fob. Yes, sir.
Where was so? You see how it is now. Was the key fob on top of that information? Was it below it? Did you have to dig in it? How'd you
Right
find it?
here.
Is that how it was when you saw it?
Yes, sir. As far as I recall, I can't remember. I just know it was in the safe.
So we got the key fob. What's under the key fob?
It's like a letter.
Who's the letter to?
Well, there's a letter to Oprah Winfrey, and letter top of this page says, "Dear Taylor." I don't know who Taylor, which Taylor he's talking about.
All right. read it.
Just for a moment, is he gonna, are you wanting the jury to see any more that's in there? Or
Yes, sir.
I'm just hoping he's being picked up properly on his testimony, because I think he's hard to hear. Of course, he's facing you, but I'm not hearing him.
Well, and I think it would be, I tell you what we'll do. Pick the items up. So let's do this, if you don't mind. And what I'll do, Your Honor, with the permission, I'm going to have him kind of display the items and then go back to the podium, and then we can work through what the content says.
That's right.
If you could remove the key fob, you showed that to the jury.
BNW key fob,
And what's the next thing?
a letter, marked Oprah Winfrey,
Okay.
some handwriting, different sheets of paper with writing on it. Looks like a lease from 2016, 2017. Passport. Some medical records, medical letter. Title of a vehicle, a Yamaha, looks like a motorcycle. Some pictures. Another piece of mail. Another medical, something from Blue Box Blue Shield. 3 more pictures. Some kind of documentation of a car deal, I believe. BMW tag, a 2018 BMW XR6. Another bill. Social Security Administration letter. Secretary of State of Springfield, Illinois. Another title to the vehicle. Birth certificate. Two notebooks. Bank book. Checkbook. Another passport. And a diploma. That's all.
All right. And if you can put the contents back in and then return to the witness stand, and we'll kind of go through a few of those items. Thank you.
Jury, we need to address these particular issues. Taking a little longer than I thought, so if we can please just step back to the jury deliberation room and relax for a few minutes. We'll get you back in here as quickly as possible. Please again, keep in mind, you cannot discuss anything about what's taking place in this courtroom. Keep the thoughts to yourself and remain open minded. Next, which 2 letters? There's 2 letters that you're wanting to read to the jury, or what?
So there's 2 letters that I intended to address with this witness, but I want to make clear it's our position that that safe is evidence. It's in. So this whole thing about he can't read it, that shouldn't be read, this is not authentic, that's hearsay or statement of the defendant, they should have thought of that before they put it in. It's in. So with this witness, I intended to ask about a couple of the letters and some more questions about the notebooks, but not necessarily having to read them. But it's our position that everything in that safe is in evidence now and be referred to in the presence of the jury. The jury has a right to know what's in it and could look at it in deliberations. They can open it and go through every piece of it.
And the state has no objection to that. The state put the safe in evidence with its content. They can absolutely review it. This witness's testimony is that he did not go through everything in that safe. He is not familiar with the contents of the safe. He doesn't know anything about the context or where they came from. Asking this witness questions about those letters when he said, I don't even remember what was in this. I don't know anything about this. That's not appropriate. If the jury wants to go through it in deliberations, it is an item in evidence. The state's objection is asking this witness to read out something that he knows absolutely nothing about.
But you're saying that it's all right for the jury to do that, even though they don't know anything about it.
It's an item in evidence. If they want to review it during deliberations, I don't see how the state can.
Let me see the 2 letters first of all.
And again,
What specifically, which letters or whatever they are documents are you referencing that you want to address specifically in front of the jury?
Well, for the record, I want to address potentially everything in that safe in front of the jury, whether it be now or in argument. But for this witness, what I intended was there's a letter in an envelope that says it's addressed to Oprah Winfrey, and there's a letter that says Dear Taylor. Right on top. He actually referenced both during the whole letter.
You can pull them both.
This is just a stack of letters. That's what's on top.
Is that what you're talking about, this stacker?
Yep. Those two things in the court deputy's hands.
And again, Your Honor, as I stated at bench conference, the letter to Oprah was sealed until last week when it was opened at defense counsel's request in our presence. It was not an item that would have been opened.
And are you intending to have him read each and every one of these? I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here that's in addition to possible letters to Taylor Swift. The one on top is it says Dear Taylor, I'm assuming you're Swift.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, but then there's something to do with Allison.
And again, my intention was not to have the detective read everything in that entire stack, and I would have to actually look through the stack very briefly to pinpoint exactly what I would have the detective read.
All right, well, I'm going to overrule the objection is it has been made an exhibit. Of course, the statement clarified, he doesn't really have any personal knowledge of what the content is based on his testimony already, but apparently it was discovered in the safe. Very good, well, I think they wanted to, whether or not it was written by him or since it is an exhibit, I will allow you to get into whatever it is you intend to get into.
That's right.
And there's a whole lot of stuff there beyond just the letters to Oprah and Taylor.
And if Your Honor, can I retrieve the two documents that you just looked at very briefly, and I can that way I can more accurately direct him to where I want him to read.
Yeah. Are we going to need to make copies of this? Or
Judge,
everybody?
copies were made of all those documents and provided to defense counsel when we went through the evidence. We met with them, we went through everything, they requested copies of those items, we provided those to them.
Do you have your copies of work that you may have worked
That would be
on?
more,
I'm
actually.
not asking for a copy right now. I'm just saying that I want to make sure I'm looking exactly at the letter I want him to read or items I want him to read, so I can make sure my order is exactly the order, because we do have working copies.
Okay. Well, while you're doing that, why don't we take about a 10-minute recess and let it get organized?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Be safe, please. All right, Jeff.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to return a stack of documents withholding 2 to Detective Summerall to put back in the safe, just not to confuse with the 2 that I'd like him to read.
All right.
This one first? This one first. Okay. That page. This one. Yes.
Just the front page.
Inspector Summerall, you've got a document in front of you. Is that one of the writings that was retrieved from the safe?
Yes, sir.
And could you read it aloud for the jury?
Taylor, I'm really confused right now. I don't know if it was you in the pictures on Instagram or someone who looks like you. Do you really have a twin sister? Which one am I in love with then? I want the Taylor that wrote those beautiful songs and sang to me at her concert. Maybe Taylor 1 wrote half and Taylor 2 wrote half. Maybe I saw Taylor 1 in Morton and Taylor 2 in I think it's concert. I'm not sure what that word is. Who is the girl in the music videos then? If there is Taylor with different identities, then who are those other people? Is Austin your brother? Maybe Calvin is boyfriend for Taylor 1 and Austin is boyfriend for Taylor 2. Taylor, I wrote you a story a few weeks ago about a dream that I had. I know you're really busy.
And you can place that back in the safe if you like. Now, another item that was in the safe was an envelope that you have in front of you. Can you describe for the jury who that envelope is addressed to?
This envelope is addressed to Oprah Winfrey.
All right. Does it have like an actual, you don't have to read it out, but does it have an actual address listed under it?
There is an address, yes.
And is there a return address?
Yes.
What's the return address?
Travis Reinking, 243 West 5th Street. I guess it's Salida, Colorado.
Okay. And was it mailed?
Mailed and returned 2/9/17.
Okay. And if you could, and you said return, so return to sender?
Return to sender, yes.
Okay. And if you could open that letter, please, and read that aloud for the jury, please.
Oprah, I'm writing you because I'm in love with Taylor Swift and I don't know if I'm delusional or not. I started writing Taylor June 2nd, 2015. The letters were about dreams that I was having. I saw Taylor for the first time September 29th, 2015. It was at a concert and she mouthed the words hello to me while she was singing a song. After that, I started to notice that what I was saying to her was getting repeated back to me on the internet. Also, things that I was doing on my phone and computer. I wrote her and gave her permission to do those things because she was being nice to me and I didn't want her to feel guilty. Later, I took back permission for her to do that because she started being cruel and lying about everything. She catfished me on the internet, made me fall in love with her, and then started being nasty to me. Taylor would link me videos that were correlated to my life. I would use algebraic substitution to assume identities between different characters. Normally, I would see a character as me if they had the same life situations as me. I remember that I wrote Taylor about a dream. She was falling because a female fan tried to hug her, and there was no handrails. After that, I watched a movie on Netflix that's called That's Not Us. The female character says to the boy character, "You can help me keep my balance by learning to ride this bicycle," I believe is the word. I told my family that I was bisexual after that. I never made the connection that the thoughts I had about men meant that I wasn't straight. I just thought it was sin. It hasn't all been bad, but now she's saying things like I'm gay and I have to hook up with a guy to see her, that only girls are allowed in her squad, and that I'm a transvestite. She says things like she's hooking up with other guys, she's hooking up with girls, that she wants to be in a relationship with more than one person. She name calls me names like Donald Trump because I told her about my science idea and she supposedly made money off of it. She tells me that I can't trust anybody. She tells me things like she has a twin sister. I have evaluated these things for myself and I know them to be untrue. If Taylor wants to live a lifestyle that I'm not sure what the word is, that's her decision. Living my life the way I want to is my own decision, and she needs to respect that. Also, I feel like Taylor has been trying to get me to meet her places. Why she wouldn't just call on the phone, I have no idea. I tried to meet her one night and I told my parents about it. They called ERS on me and had me forced by the police to get mentally evaluated. I was kept against my will for 6 or 7 days. The doctor, without a root cause analysis, told me that I was schizophrenic because I was having paranoid delusions of grandeur. When I asked him how he knew Taylor wasn't hacking me, he just said, "Trust me, she's not hacking you." I think that stealing someone's intellectual property would be a very plausible cause for someone to hack someone else, especially if it's worth what Donald Trump is worth. Last week, I thought Taylor was telling me to come home. I don't know the truth about her, so I thought the only way I'm going to know is to go see her. I figured that home is where she is, so I went to her house in LA. Taylor made it sound like I was all good for landing on my way there. She said that it was a trust fall and I just had to do it and trust her. I did it, but when I got there, the place was under construction and looked like it had been abandoned. I believe Taylor went there and I had driven 1,000 miles to see her. I was mad and posted a video on Twitter of me yelling outside her house. Now I don't know what to believe. I've reached out to the police, FBI, and even President Obama. I want the internet hacking to stop if it is in fact happening. I want to know for sure if I'm delusional or not. Maybe this is someone else on the internet, like the government. Maybe I was just wrong and saw different patterns. I'm pretty certain that it's Taylor because that's what they told me, and only Taylor should have gotten my written letters. I'm so in love with Taylor, and I'm chasing her the only way I know how. You're her friend, and I'm sure you would find out if this is real or not. Please, you have to help me. It's been a year and a half, and if this isn't real, I would really like to move on with my life. Taylor would probably like it too if strangers weren't showing up and yelling at her door. If it is real, I want to know why she is pretending to be someone else. I want to know why she is hacking me and stealing from me. I want to be able to get her help if she needs it. Maybe something like this is better suited for Mari. I know that you're a caring and generous person, Oprah, and if there is an honest person in show business, it's you. Please help me figure this out. Travis Reinking and his address.
Thank you. And you can place that letter back into the envelope. Those are my questions.
All right. Be ready.
Detective Summerall, anytime that there is digital evidence in a criminal investigation, is it common practice that you do not actually review the digital evidence, but there are detectives that are trained in computer forensics and mobile forensics that actually review that evidence, and then they just report back to you if there is something pertinent to the case?
Yes, ma'am.
And the GoPro videos were reviewed to see if by chance there was anything related to this homicide. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so that review was done looking for evidence related to April 22nd, 2018.
Yes, ma'am.
And if the SISU department and Detective Gish would have located something pertinent, that would have been relayed back to you.
Correct.
And was there anything specifically related to 4/22/2018, this homicide incident at 3:23:50 a.m.?
Nothing that related to the homicide or would help us in finding Travis at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, that concludes the officer's testimony. We're going to switch over to a psychologist's testimony now. And it's worth pointing out that this psychologist is the first witness the defense is calling to the stand, meaning they are the ones that hired and brought her to trial.
Good afternoon, Dr. Wood.
Good afternoon.
If you need some water at some point, I think they can provide.
Undergoing treatment, or someone whose prominent symptom is more these delusions, these kind of embedded complex beliefs that they possess about the world around them, usually don't come out or like become observable to people around them unless they're kind of tapped, unless you ask about them or they're accessed in some way.
Can a schizophrenic person be compliant with directions and orders?
Absolutely.
If I told them to get into this car, could they be compliant and get in the car?
Absolutely.
Or get out of the car and go into a building?
Absolutely.
Could they be compliant with medical staff?
Absolutely.
And still be schizophrenic?
Yes.
Okay. Can they hold a job?
Some do, yes.
Okay. I believe you're aware that Mr. Reinking held a job as a crane operator.
At points, yes.
Yeah. And do you believe that he could operate, have a job as a crane operator and still be schizophrenic?
Yes.
Right. Now, I want to go into, you said that the diagnosis was schizophrenia.
Correct.
For Mr. Reinking. I want you to tell the jury what is the basis of your opinion. What did you consider, what did you factor in to come up with this diagnosis of schizophrenia?
Sure. So in arriving at a diagnosis, there's all sorts of information that I consider. The most salient of which is how someone presents with me during the interview. So I'm paying attention to their behavior, the way that they're thinking, what they're talking about. But I think more important in this case, I want to review a couple of incidents that were documented in the records that I think really predated this incident and supported this diagnosis long before he came to the attention of the police in April of 2018. The first incident was in May of 2016 in his hometown in Illinois. At that point in time, Mr. Reinking's parents called with the Emergency Response Service, which is kind of equivalent to the Mobile Crisis Service here in Nashville, and said that she was concerned about her son and wanted an evaluation. The ERS team or crisis team responded in addition to the police department, at which point they explained that Mr. Reinking had been behaving bizarrely for about a year before. At the point he was talking about that he was being harassed, that Taylor Swift was calling him downtown. His mom had accompanied him, and he was walking down the street. He swore that Taylor Swift was across the street and saying something to him. He ran across the street. At one point, he climbed on top of a rooftop looking for Taylor Swift and saying that he was finding her. She was communicating with him, and maintained this when the police arrived. His parents explained to the crisis team that this had been going on for a little while. He'd become more depressed and isolated than the year before, but this was the most significant event that had happened. He was described by the police officers as uncooperative in the sense that he didn't perceive anything was wrong with him. He did not want to go to the hospital. He did not want to cooperate in a crisis assessment. He did make it clear, talking to the police, that he didn't want to hurt anyone, but he wanted the harassment to stop. Ultimately, Mr. Reinking got into his car and left. And while they left, his parents continued talking to the crisis evaluator, at which point they said, "We're really concerned. He said things earlier today that made us think he was going to hurt himself. And we have firearms that he has access to, and we're really worried." At that point, Mr. Reinking came back, and then they put him into protective custody and hospitalized him because there were concerns about his imminent risk to harm himself or someone else. Now, at this point, he was describing this sort of harassment, these messages that Taylor Swift was talking to him that had become increasingly intense over those months preceding. Mr. Reinking was ultimately hospitalized at a psychiatric hospital there in town for about a week. These records described him as paranoid. They described him as delusional. He was preoccupied with Taylor Swift. When they talked to him about this harassment and this hacking, he kept referring to his cell phone, saying, "There's coded messages in there. I can show them to you. This is actually happening." He was started on an antipsychotic medication and seemed to improve a little bit, in the sense that by the end of his hospitalization, he was willing to say that it's possible I've misinterpreted this, but he maintained that it was not a misinterpretation. He was released from the hospital, and he complied with one outpatient appointment after that, which he said is only to appease my parents. I'm not mentally ill. There's nothing wrong with me. The next incident that was documented for Mr.
I hate to interrupt, but since she's finished the first example, I've asked for the cautionary instruction.
Yeah, members of the jury, let me just read this here, and I'm going to read it to you again. At the end of the trial, you have heard Dr. Wood testify the information that she relied upon in offering or will be offering as part of her expert opinion. This information, while I have allowed it to be admitted, is in fact hearsay and is intended solely for your use to understand, weigh, and assess the expert opinions that she may ultimately give. You cannot consider it for the truth of what was told to her or related to her. You can only consider how she might have used that information to form the basis of the opinion that she ultimately came up with. Is that satisfactory?
So, Dr. Wood, along those lines, based on the instruction that this is hearsay, can you tell the jury specifically what you looked at to get that information?
The first was an incident report that I believe was completed by the Tazewell Sheriff's Office. It was actually completed by the police officer that responded. And I also looked at the crisis evaluation, which was completed, I think, by the crisis or emergency response, as well as the records from the hospitalization. So those were provided by the providers, the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the therapist that he saw when he was in the hospital.
So these are law enforcement documents?
The first few were, yes.
Medical documents?
And medical documents, correct.
This is not people just telling you stories.
That's correct.
These are actual law enforcement medical reports that you reviewed and coming up with this.
These are records that had documented things that happened before, correct.
Okay. You can go on to the next incident.
Sure. So the next incident that I had that was documented was a audio recording of a phone call that Mr. Reinking made while he was in Colorado. He told me that he moved to Colorado shortly after the hospitalization to get away from his family and sort of start a new life. He was concerned about this kind of harassment and sort of moving. The audio recording that I received was Mr. Reinking calling the police department saying that he wanted to report that he was being harassed and he was receiving these harassing communications. He wanted to report that he was being stalked. I believe this audio recording, it was provided to me by the defense attorney, and I believe that it was broadcast on the news, which is how they had access to it. In this phone call, he was had a difficult time articulating who it was that was harassing him or what these messages were, but he was very clear that he wanted to file a police report and there was some sort of stalking that was occurring, and that was in March of 2017. The next incident...
And pardon me for interrupting, I missed one thing. You said that was in March of 17. I just want to make it clear. The first incident was May of 2016. Is that right?
Correct. Do you mind if I just verify that on my report here? Yeah, the first incident was May of 2016.
Okay. Would have been just under 2 years prior to the Waffle House incident.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. I apologize. Then you said March of 2017 is the incident where he's contacting law enforcement in Denver, Colorado, explaining what's happening to him at that point.
Correct, and wants to report a police report about his being stalked and harassed, yes.
Okay. And then go on to the next incident.
The next incident, I reviewed 2 incident reports that were completed by the Tazewell Sheriff's Office, which is the same office that did the initial crisis evaluation the year before. These documents reviewed 2 phone calls or 2 reports that were made to the police that day, and it was in June of 2017. The first report that was made was by a coworker of Mr. Reinking, who also worked at his father's business. It was also Crane Business. He explained, at the time, Mr. Reinking was living on an apartment on top of the business, and they had gotten into an argument. He was worried because during that argument, Mr. Reinking got very upset. He ended up coming out of his apartment with an assault rifle. He was wearing a pink, the records are different. Some describe it as a pink woman's house coat or maybe a dress. He was wearing this pink dress with nothing underneath it, with the assault rifle. He came downstairs. He screamed something at him saying, "Is this what you fucking want?" He put the assault rifle into the car and drove away. This individual called the police department and said, "I don't know where he went or what happened, but I'm worried." The same day, some individuals from a nearby pool called the police to report another incident. In this incident, they said that Mr. Reinking had arrived at the pool in the same pink housecoat. He walked into the pool area, jumped into the pool. I believe at the point in time he pulled off the housecoat. He was only wearing underwear. At some point during this incident, he exposed himself to the people there. He, again, was saying things, I think he screamed something like, "I am a man." The lifeguards were trying to intervene to get him out of the pool to figure out what was going on. He was described as uncooperative. They said that he was trying to fight with the lifeguards, but he was very angry at the time. Mr. Reinking ended up leaving the pool. Both of these reports clearly said Mr. Reinking has some mental problems. The incident at the pool said no one wanted to press charges. This is just an informational report. And then they went that evening and talked to Mr. Reinking at his house to kind of check in and see what was going on. At this point, they again said that Mr. Reinking clearly has some mental problems. He said, "I don't want to talk to the crisis people. I went to the hospital before. There's nothing wrong with me." And that was sort of the end of it. The police officers talked to his father at that time and said, "Can you kind of get the guns from him? I think we're concerned about what's happening." I think at that point his sister agreed to talk to him and make sure he didn't have access to weapons. But that was kind of the end of that incident. And that was in June of 2017.
When is the next significant incident that factors into your opinion?
The next incident, I think, was it was July 7th of 2017, which was about 3 weeks later. Okay. And at that point, Mr. Reinking drove to the White House. And this was an incident report that was provided to me that was written by the person who was manning the gate at the White House. This incident report says that Mr. Reinking pulled up to the pedestrian gate in his car. He said, he asked to speak to the president first, and then the person manning the gate redirected him and sort of told him, if this is how you want a tour, this is how you can get it. Mr. Reinking was sort of uncooperative, and he said, "I'm here to talk to the president." He made a reference to wanting to inspect the grounds. He referred to himself as an American national. He was not responsive to redirection. They described him as kind of continuing to try to walk past the barrier despite the agent saying you can't come in, at which point he was arrested for, I think it was trespassing or unlawful, being there unlawfully. I don't have any records detailing the resolution of that other than from Mr. Reinking himself, but he told me that he completed some community service and underwent a psych eval, and that was how that was resolved. The next incident was about a month later, in August of 2017, back in Mr. Reinking's hometown. Tazewell Sheriff's Office reported that Mr. Reinking at an intersection pulled over next to a police officer and said, "I want to file a report." At this point, he said he wanted to file a report. He was being hacked. He was receiving messages. He believed that he was being hacked and watched and followed by something like 20 to 30 people. He wanted this to be documented. The police officer in that report described him as very concerned and worried, and ultimately took this report to document this stalking, but that was really the end of that incident. About 2 weeks later, they arrived at Mr. Reinking's home. I'm not sure what prompted this, but that was the point at which they took his guns and ammunition. And I think there was some reference of a FOID card. I don't know if this was because of the incident at the White House, but ultimately he surrendered his guns and ammunition at that point. That was the end of August of 2017. The next series of incidents that I have documented are in April of 2018. Now, I understand in that intervening period, Mr.
Dr.
Reinking...
Wood, just real quick, and
Sorry.
make sure before we go to there. These incidents that you're talking about with the swimming pool and the DC and the guns and all that kind of stuff, this is all based on police reports, law enforcement reports. Is that correct?
Correct. These are all information I'm telling you from the records.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
That's okay.
Go on to the next events.
So the next events happened in April of 2018. My understanding is in that time frame, Mr. Reinking relocated here to Nashville. The first incident is the beginning, or about, I think it was April 11th of 2018. Mr. Reinking had brought his computer into a repair shop and asked them to repair it. I understand that he believed they had messed with his computer. I listened to an audio recording of a phone call with Mr. Reinking and the technician who worked at this repair shop. I'm not sure where this phone call came from. I don't know who provided it. But during this phone call, Mr. Reinking asked them, "What did you do to my computer?" He said something to the effect of, "Why do you keep doing this to me?" He was again accusing them of harassing him and sort of hacking his computer, which was consistent with this sort of series of records that I had. At the end of the phone call, Mr. Reinking got very upset and eventually told the person on the other end of the phone to jump off of a bridge or go kill themselves. About 6 days later, there was an incident that happened at a BMW dealership in Brentwood. The information that I have documenting this incident was a recording with the salesperson, and I don't recall what other piece of information I reviewed. But this incident, Mr. Reinking showed up at a BMW dealership on April 17th, which was 5 days before the alleged incident. He asked to look at a vehicle, got into the car. When he was in the car with the woman, he said something like, "I'm going to take this car." And she laughed it off, and he said, "I don't think you understand me, I'm taking this car." She eventually got out of the car, and Mr. Reinking left with the car. She described that he had some difficulty in the car, like putting the car into drive. He seemed to not really know what he was doing. Trying to get out of the parking lot, he, I guess, like took a wrong turn and ended up driving throughout the parking lot for several minutes before he made it out. They said later that he had put his address into the GPS in the car and drove home. And I understand they went and got the car back the next morning.
Did you... You said something about YouTube videos that you reviewed?
Correct. I also reviewed a series of YouTube videos that were provided to me by the defense attorney at that time. These were videos that I understand his uncle had sort of gotten offline. Mr. Reinking had created a YouTube channel online. These videos were Mr. Reinking documenting this harassment, these messages. He, in these videos, described this as a psychological assault. He said, "These people are messaging me, they're hacking me." He described it as torture. He said, "I'm being traumatized from this." He said, "I've been asking for help." He documented several things that he'd done to get help. He said, "I've called the police, I've gone to the White House, I talked to the FBI. No one's listening to me, no one believes me." During one of the videos, Mr. Reinking described how he would barricade himself in his apartment using a clipboard in the door to prevent intruders from entering. He also at one point panned the video to his bed, where he showed that he had been sleeping with a loaded assault rifle in the event that someone came into his house and was there to harm him. During these videos, he was clearly demonstrating that he was fearful of his life. He described how this has increased in intensity over time. He was worried. He didn't know why this was happening. And sort of at one point said something to the effect of, "What am I supposed to do? Why are they doing this to me, and what am I supposed to do?" There was also some videos of him where he had taken not screenshots, but where he was sort of videoing him playing a video game. and he was showing what he believed was evidence of them hacking. So he was saying, you see that? Did you see how that happened? And so it was clear for me watching the video. I don't play video games, but there was nothing in this video to me that suggested that there was anything off. But Mr. Reinking was very adamant in these videos that this proved this persecution and this hacking, and that something was happening to him.
Did he, so was there evidence up until the incident, that's 2 years before going through, did you see any evidence dealing with any paranoia about the government or paranoia with law enforcement?
Correct. I think that's one of the sort of threads that ties these incidents together. And even with talking with Mr. Reinking in particular, is that what he described as this initially started with kind of friendly communications with Taylor Swift. He described that he had gone to a concert and she directly addressed him. She said hello to him in the audience. And that initially it was kind of friendly communications. They were messaging. He was writing her letters. During his hospitalization in 2016, he said that she was helping him find himself. Over time, though, these communications changed. They progressed. And they progressed in several ways. Number one, they progressed in terms of the frequency. So they were happening more and more often. They progressed in terms of the intensity and the tone of these communications. They had begun with sort of this, what he, I think, believed was a romantic or friendship relationship with Taylor Swift. Over time, it became threatening, and he started to say, I don't know why they're doing this to me. They're messing with me. They're doing something to my head. In addition to changing in terms of the content of those communications, it also changed in terms of his perception of who was communicating with him. It was initially just Taylor Swift and then Ariana Grande at one point. Over time, he believed that his family was involved. He thought the CIA, the FBI, the police, various individuals. And I talked about these things that he did to kind of get help over time. And he perceived the fact that nothing was done when he filed these reports as evidence that these individuals were involved. I can also tell you that during my interviews with Mr. Reinking, he later told his attorney that I guess I had made some motion with my mouth or something, and he started to believe that I was potentially involved in this sort of larger conspiracy. And so I think that's really characteristic of Mr. Reinking, is in the beginning it was relatively benign, it was friendly, it was this relationship, but over time it grew increasingly threatening, it was increasingly harassing communication. Mr. Reinking at different times said that they were trying to bait him into breaking the law. They were trying to bait him into killing himself. They were breaking into his home. They were hacking into his computer. And he wasn't sure sort of what was going to happen next, and ultimately sort of culminated with what happened.
Did you have any information from any of these records, videos, or anything, the evaluation, any other parts of the evaluation you did, any indication about any interaction that he believed he had with aliens?
With who?
Aliens?
Yes. A couple references, so the jail records in particular, in my conversations with Mr. Reinking, believes that he has what I would call kind of grandiose delusions, and that he has communications with aliens and extraterrestrial beings. He at one point referred to himself as leader of the Asgard world, which is what he calls these alien greys, is what he referred to them as, and that he had what he called genetic advances and he described developing telekinetic or extrasensory perceptions following an assault in late 2015, and described that after that he believed he had these genetic advances that sort of brought him to the attention of these aliens. And these aliens, including one to whom he believes he's married named Celine, ultimately kind of brought him to the attention of other people, that he had these brilliant ideas and this sacred knowledge that was of interest to other people.
Okay. So all of that perhaps more form the basis of your opinion that he suffers from schizophrenia.
Absolutely.
My next question is, do you have an opinion as to his mental state at the time of the offense?
I did form an opinion about that, yes.
And what is that?
My opinion is that based...
Jack, can we approach?
You may.
Dr. Wood, at the time of the offense in this case, April 22nd of 2018, do you believe that Mr. Reinking was suffering from schizophrenia?
I do.
And what is the basis of that opinion?
The records that clearly document this pattern of increasingly paranoid and persecutory beliefs that he was being harassed, targeted, sexually assaulted, drugged, in great danger of his life, that had been documented with these repeated incidents with the police and psychiatric hospitalizations, as well as his presentation with me during the interview.
Okay. Do you have an opinion and you're familiar with what happened in this case, right?
Yes.
I think you've received some surveillance or surveillance videos or
Correct.
reports and stuff like that. So you're familiar with what happened in
Yes.
this case. Okay. So do you have an opinion as to whether Mr. Reinking was able to understand what he was doing, or to understand that what he was doing was wrong?
I do have an opinion.
Object is a compound question.
All right. Do you have an opinion as to whether Mr. Reinking was able to understand that what he was doing was wrong on the incident at Waffle House on April 22nd, 2018?
I do have an opinion about that.
What is your opinion about that?
That he did not appreciate what he was doing was wrong.
All right. What is the basis of your opinion for that?
Well, I've described that at the point in time that this occurred, Mr. Reinking had grown increasingly fearful of this persecution, this hacking, that these things were happening to him. At one point in time and in one video, he said, someone came into his apartment and drugged him and sexually assaulted or raped him that night. He described people breaking into his home, and he was increasingly concerned over the course of time what they were going to do. Mr. Reinking, during the course of the evaluation, provided me a handwritten journal that he had written while he was in jail that documented these things, in addition to providing me an account during my interview. Mr. Reinking explained to me that when he went and repossessed the BMW, it was consistent with his belief that at the time, they've stolen everything from me. I can repossess this. It just makes sense to me. Why couldn't I? I told you that the next morning they took the BMW back, but had no interaction with the police. And Mr. Reinking interpreted this consistent with the way he'd kind of viewed himself to this point, is that he was an invisible man. They weren't going to do anything. He'd asked them for help. No one was listening. They didn't believe him. He stole a BMW and they didn't even arrest him. And so that was sort of what he was thinking about at the time of this incident. Earlier that month, he'd been fired from his job for confronting someone about this paranoia. He'd been increasingly concerned about his family's involvement, the police's involvement. He'd lost this job. The night of the incident, Mr. Reinking said that he arrived home and he found evidence in his apartment that had been broken into. He said that there was an unusual smell that's not normally there. There were things that were missing, and I believe a door was closed when it's normally opened. At that moment, Mr. Reinking explained that he was incredibly fearful and terrified. He said, at that point, I felt like their behavior had become increasingly erratic and unpredictable. I didn't know what they were going to do next. During my conversations with Mr. Reinking, and as well as in his journal, he described this as what he considered a life and death situation. Mr. Reinking said, at this point, I didn't know what else to do. I'd gone to their people. I told the police. I'd asked for help. I'd made these videos. I'd sleep with an assault rifle, all of these things, and I'm still not safe. Mr. Reinking described that he had a thought in his mind about, well, I guess I should take something from them that they can't take back. And so I had mentioned repossessing the BMW. He had described sort of walking out on a tab a couple days before, and that was sort of in line with his belief that he was invisible. It didn't matter what he did. Mr. Reinking then prayed at that point to God about what should I do. He has described that in that moment he received, at times he described it as a voice, at other times a command from God that was very specific and it was very directive. And this directed command from God was to take his jacket, the jacket that he was wearing, take the gun, and go to Waffle House and shoot 3 people. Mr. Reinking described feeling terrified upon receiving this command. He was very unsettled about this. He described feeling very conflicted. This is not something that he wanted to do. In fact, he described kind of wrestling with this, thinking, well, this is a command from God. What if this is a test of my faith? This is God that's telling me to do this. Maybe I should do this. Mr. Reinking described at that point pacing around his apartment and announcing his intentions to go to the Waffle House. And he said, I was doing that because I knew that they were listening to me, and I hoped that they would listen, they would hear me, they would leave. He said, I wanted to get to the Waffle House, I wanted the lights to be off. He also prayed that if the message was wrong, or maybe he was mishearing it in some way, that maybe the gun would jam, that this wouldn't happen. Ultimately, he put on the jacket, he got the gun, and he walked to his car. He described feeling humiliated and embarrassed, but he also said this was somewhat symbolic of what had happened to him. He said, they'd taken everything from me, including my dignity. It was sort of symbolic of where I was in that moment. He drove to the Waffle House. He sat in his truck. And again, I mentioned that he described sort of grappling with this decision. I don't want to do this. I don't want to kill these people. Mr. Reinking was sort of still looking for something to not do this. He said that he was upset and in some ways angry when he arrived and saw the lights were on and saw how many people were inside. I mentioned this sort of misinterpretation of evidence or interpreting information in a way that's consistent with one's delusions. Mr. Reinking's interpretation of that was that these individuals knew that he was coming and stayed there on purpose. They were taunting him. They were continuing to not listen to him. They didn't believe that he would do anything. Mr. Reinking mentioned that he stayed sitting in the car for several minutes looking at the case reports. It was about 4 minutes that he sat in his car. He said that during this time frame, he continued to grapple with this decision. What if it's wrong? I hope this is wrong. I hope the gun jams. I don't want to do this. He then described 2 events that happened while he was sitting in the parking lot that he perceived as messages or things that confirmed to him that this was the right thing to do. The first of which is he saw a car nearby with the hazard lights that were on. He related this back to an incident, his being stalked in Colorado, saying that I knew there was no reason for someone to have their hazard lights on in a parking lot. I knew that was directed to me. The second thing that happened was a person got out of a truck nearby him and they had a number 3 on their hat. Mr. Reinking has described personal significance with the number 3. This 3 he described at one point sending Taylor Swift, I think 333 or 999 starbursts. That this number 3 has been personally significant for him. And he perceived that number 3 as another message to him. It was corroborating. What he referred to this as authentication, that these 2 things authenticated the message that he got and that this was the right thing to do. He said in that moment that he described feeling unclean and unholy. He didn't want to do this, but when those things happened, this chain of events that led to this, he knew at that moment, he was confident that this is what he was supposed to do. And that's when he walked out of the car and walked into the Waffle House and proceeded to shoot the individuals. In fact, Mr. Reinking said that after walking into the Waffle House and the gun jammed, part of him at that moment believed that may have been God intervening. That was what he had prayed to happen, and he wondered if he had sort of finished the job at that point, and that's why the gun jammed. He then explained that he left. He took the jacket off after the altercation with Mr. Shaw and walked back to his apartment. Because of this and all of this together, I think that you have to really understand Mr. Reinking's mental state from the perspective of what we know happened in the months preceding. That Mr. Reinking was in an increasingly paranoid state where he believed that he was being attacked. These individuals were attacking him from all angles in ways that he couldn't predict. That night, he believed they'd broken into his apartment. They'd grown increasingly erratic and unpredictable. He felt unsafe. He described all sorts of things that he'd done to get help, to seek assistance, to protect himself, none of which had worked, and in fact, all of which sort of coalesced with his decision or sort of understanding that everyone was involved in this. And ultimately, I think in that moment, because of Mr. Reinking's beliefs, these really complex delusional system, the way that he was thinking and feeling, he did not appreciate.
Objection, Your Honor. Objection. Maybe
Let me just ask the question.
Judge, yes, we need to address.
Come forward. Members of the jury, sometimes in these situations you kind of walk a thin line, kind of a tightrope. The opinions of the expert.
Let me approach that positive. Let me approach this thing.
Yes. So I will refrain from making any comments at this point in time. If there's clarification needed, I will make it at the appropriate time.
Hey, Doctor, the question, get closer to the microphone. Dr. Wooden, based upon his behaviors the years before the incident, and based upon his description of his behaviors the evening of the incident, do you have an opinion as to whether or not he could have appreciated the wrongfulness of his actions that occurred on April 22nd, 2018?
I do have an opinion about that.
What is that opinion?
My opinion is that he did not appreciate the wrongfulness of his actions that night.
Okay. I want to cover just quickly a couple of more areas. Can you explain to the jury a concept known in your field as malingering?
Malingering is what's referred to as essentially faking. That is someone who may be intentionally fabricating or exaggerating symptoms, usually psychiatric symptoms or psychotic symptoms, for the purpose of an external gain. In a situation like this, that external gain would be found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Okay. Do you think, do you have an opinion as to whether or not you think Mr. Reinking was malingering when he was doing these actions and talking to you?
I do.
What is your opinion as to that?
I do not believe that Mr. Reinking was malingering at the time of my evaluation.
And why is that?
There was no evidence during my conversation with him that he was exaggerating anything. In fact, if anything, he was kind of guarded about talking about some of these symptoms at times, which is inconsistent with someone who's trying to fake or exaggerate symptoms. The other thing that we're considering when we're looking at malingering is we're looking at the degree of consistency or convergence of information over time. So as I mentioned before, I'm not just considering what Mr. Reinking told me. In fact, Mr. Reinking's account in this journal is a piece of information, but ultimately it needs to fit within the larger puzzle of information that I get from other sources. Now, the consistency of that information, his cooperation, his level of guardedness, and his presentation and how that kind of fit in with the larger picture suggests to me that malingering was not an issue in this case.
Okay. And then finally, I want to ask you, there's been facts, and you may have been aware of this, but based on looking at the video, but after the incident took place at the Waffle House, Mr. Reinking did not stay there.
Correct.
He left with that jacket, then the jacket came off, and then I believe it was 30-something hours later, he was found in the woods with a backpack.
Correct.
Okay. Do you still, can you explain, based on all your evaluation, what you've done in here, can you explain why he would have done that?
I can explain my understanding of why I think he did that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I want to point out, I'm glad you brought this up. When we're looking at evaluating someone's mental state at the time of an incident and whether or not they appreciated the wrongfulness, oftentimes information that's used to support that they appreciated the wrongfulness is attempts to evade detection, to avoid or conceal evidence, to flee the scene, all of which suggests that someone at that point in time appreciated that what they were doing was wrong because there was some reason for which they should be fleeing. I would note, however, in this case, is you really have to consider Mr. Reinking's actions within the context of what we know of how he understood the world at that time. Mr. Reinking, there's significant evidence to suggest and continue to suggest that Mr. Reinking believed that he was in danger, and he was in danger at the hands of police, the CIA and the FBI. And it makes conceptual sense to me that someone who would do something at this point and believe that the police were going to respond, individuals that he perceived as working against him, baiting him to kill himself and potentially breaking into his home and going to harm him, it makes sense to me then that Mr. Reinking would not have stayed.
Just 1 second, Your Honor.
Okay, so we're going to stop here and continue with the continuation of her testimony in the other videos. She kind of just continues on with some other things that aren't directly about Travis's encounters in the past. You know, it's interesting because I'm not saying that I am not believing what they're saying. It's more, you know, I can't help but notice contradictions, like him saying, you know, God told him to shoot 3 people and then he brings over 60 rounds of ammo. Like, there's definitely some discrepancies in his beliefs and story. And I mean, you know, you could swing it either way, what she just said about he fled because he was in fear or he fled because he knew what he was doing was wrong. You know, you can swing it either way.
Here, before we start back up, there was a paragraph of part of the report or something to that effect that was displayed before we recessed. To the extent that that is in any way, form, or fashion imprinted upon your brains, push delete. You are not to consider it for any reason whatsoever. That is something that was not relevant the way it was presented, and so just forget it. You know, we're going to kind of pick back up and we'll approach it maybe a little bit different way. All right,
Dr. Wood, we were discussing that as part of your third interview with the defendant,
you discussed with him the mass murder that happened on April 22nd, 2018, correct?
Correct.
And one of the things that he described to you in that interview as the reason for his action was that it was punitive.
Among other things, yes.
But he specifically used the term punitive.
Well, I think he was using punitive in reference to like the police reports he'd made before, previous to this incident, I think is what he was referring to as punitive.
Okay. But he was equating his actions with his actions on April 22nd, 2018 with being punitive.
Yes, a punitive response. Correct.
Right. Punishment then.
Correct.
Okay. And the reason that he wanted to punish them is because he said he needed to steal something from them that they couldn't just steal back from him.
He explained he was trying to protect himself. Yes.
Well, actually, he said, well, now I have to do something that's more direct, something they can't just steal from me.
Correct.
That's a direct quote from him.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And so as he's describing why he carried out this mass murder, he's telling you that he believed he was mistreated, and therefore he should be able to mistreat other people.
I don't know that it was necessarily that direct I don't know that I would make that direct correlation there.
Well, he's saying it was punitive to him.
Correct.
And therefore he's going to be punitive to the people who were inside the Waffle House, those innocent people who lost their lives.
He did not perceive them as innocent people. He referred to them as targets and believed they were part of the CIA who were this operation against him.
Right.
And he did characterize it as punitive in some ways, but ultimately he described that as that they weren't listening to anything else. He tried alternative courses of actions. At one point he said, what am I supposed to do? I don't have a prison. I cannot detain them.
Well, he used the word targets not in the way that you used it, though. You discussed that and you included it in you discussed that with him in your interview, did you not?
Him referring to them as targets, yes.
And in fact, what he told you was that he used the phrase targets in quotation marks. Because he'd seen that in military videos that were recommended to him, and that's how they did it in the military. It makes it easier. And that's how you have to look at it. Right?
Correct.
So when he says he looked at these innocent individuals who are inside Waffle House with their friends and loved ones just trying to go home, get some food before they go home, when he says he calls them targets, he's calling them targets because he wants to dehumanize them.
Well, he's not necessarily... He doesn't perceive them as innocent bystanders. He perceived those people in the Waffle House that night as CIA agents. He referred to victim number 4 as a rogue agent. These were individuals that he believed were part of this conspiracy, that had been doing the attacking, that had been doing the harassing, that had broken into his home, that had listened to him say, I'm coming there to do this, and stayed there in a direct effort to quote-unquote taunt or continue this harassment against him. I just want to clarify, he did not perceive these as innocent bystanders at that point in time.
Well, but he specifically said the military, they refer to the people as targets because it makes it easier when you have to kill them. That's what he's saying.
Correct, which was consistent with his talking about grappling with this direction. He didn't want to hurt anyone and was saying that these videos of them referring to them as targets kind of dehumanizes them to a sense that he can do that.
Now, when you say that we're talking about what the punishment was in response to, the reality is that he was upset because the police had taken back this BMW that he had just carjacked from a sales lady and taken.
I think he was confused about that happening, yes, but I don't think that was the pivotal moment of why he did this. No.
You think he was confused about what happened with the BMW?
Well, no, I think he knew exactly what happened. But I think when Mr. Reinking talked about it later, he said, like, they just came back and got the car. Why didn't they arrest me? I'm invisible to them. They don't even do anything to me. And that's when he sort of said, I mean, it doesn't matter what I do. They're not responding.
And Dr. Wood, at this time, I'd like to pass up a document to you.
I've got some. Thanks. Oh, thank you.
Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is it?
This is the handwritten journal that Mr. Reinking provided to me as part of the evaluation.
And you relied on that in making your opinion?
Yes, I consider this information.
No. And you received, when did you receive that document?
I think it was May 30th when he provided it to me.
Okay. And when he provided that journal entry to you, he told you that he didn't want to talk to you anymore.
He did not tell that to me until the final date when I returned to speak to him.
The final date being?
June 5th.
You went back to meet with him on June the 5th.
Correct.
And he told you, I don't want to talk to you. I've told you everything I have to say.
Told you everything I have. Everything's in the journal. I don't have anything else to say.
And on June 5th, you were actually going to provide him or attempt to do the malingering test on that day.
I was going to administer some testing on that day, correct.
And so he told you on that day, which you had intended to do the malingering test, I don't want to talk to you. And so you were unable to even get to that point.
Correct.
All right. And so he gave you that journal entry that we just discussed there, and contained therein is a description of him committing this carjacking, is it not?
I don't recall, but I remember he wrote about that. I assume it's in this one.
Okay, I'd ask that be made an exhibit. Hey. And I'd like her to be able to have it back now that it's in evidence. So, yes.
How many pages is this?
25, Judge.
Is that 25 pages?
Yes.
What was the date of it?
It has various dates. It starts with the date of May 21st, 2018.
That's good enough. I just want to reference it to the exhibit.
What do you recall how he described to you stealing this BMW?
You mean in terms of what happened?
What do you recall him saying to you?
I recall that he mentioned it during the interview with me, which would have been on the first or second date. I recall him saying that, referring to it as repossessing a car. His description of why he did that was, it made sense to him, I think is the word he used. It made sense to him. They had taken everything from him. He could repossess things. And so he had gone to this dealership to get the car.
And did he describe using force to you?
I don't think he did.
Okay. Would you have noted that if he told you that he used force to take the BMW?
Probably. Yeah, I think that would be relevant.
Okay. And so based on your conversation with him, you took it to mean that he was taking this vehicle and he'd already had ownership of it in his mind.
In his mind, he referred to it as repossessing the vehicle.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd like you to, this is Exhibit 70, right? I'd like you to go to the bottom of page 4. I believe it's the last paragraph. Would you read what that last paragraph is? I think it's about 4 lines.
So when I went to get my car, I wanted to get a nice one. one that I felt would be comfortable on long drives and something I could use for a while.
And can you continue on to page 5, please?
I imagine taking it back out to Colorado to drive in the mountains. That way I could visit John and Misty Turley again and enjoy the finer things in life.
Please continue.
For me, nothing was better than doing a couple of puffs of marijuana out of a glass pipe or loud, maybe, and going for a long walk down the trail in Salida. That was my happy place in this sick world. Being in the mountain air surrounded by an incredible view of nature and feeling like you were witnessing it for the very first time in your life. It was glorious. Gorgeous? Glorious. Then walking down to Brown Dog to get a dirty spiced chai tea or eating breakfast at the Pancake Palace was about as close to heaven that I could get here.
And please stop there. So it appears that he's describing getting a car and going off to live a very happy life, content with friends, and doing the things that he wants to do. Is that what you read from that?
Sure. At different times he talked about, when he used this word about repossessing and gaining access to things, he talked about it was nice for these days when he was repossessing things from the gas station and the steak dinner, that it was nice for him to experience these finer things in life. I recall him saying it wasn't since he was in Colorado that he'd experienced those.
Did he, when you met with him in person, did he give you an explanation as to what happened after he committed this carjacking?
In terms of what happened next?
Yeah.
I believe he drove back to his apartment. He talked about taking the tags off. He later took an Uber to go back to get his truck. He described that the Uber driver he thought was a CIA agent because he read his mind and turned on the radio when he wanted to listen to music. And then at one point he thought the driver was going to take him to the police station, and was kind of surprised that the driver brought him back to his truck.
Okay. And so he described to you taking this BMW and driving back to his house, and that was kind of it. That's what you recall?
Yes.
Okay. So he didn't describe to you being chased by the police and fleeing from them, realizing that they were there, lights and sirens, refusing to stop, getting home, taking all of the identifying information off of the car such that they wouldn't know that it was a brand new stolen car? You didn't?
I don't recall that, but I do recall him mentioning when he got home that night that there were police and sirens there.
Okay, I'd like you to go to page 8 of Exhibit 70. Okay. There's a paragraph there. Fourth paragraph starts with, "After I got back to my apartment."
Mm-hmm.
Could you read that for us?
Sure. After I got back to my apartment with it, I took all the security and price tag stuff off the window to throw it in the trash. I noticed that the window sticker said something like $88,000, and that was before all the other charges that come with a new vehicle. It was about what I imagined it would be. I fantasized about how great it would be to keep it. I would have a really nice truck to drive around, and I could sell my old pickup truck to have some extra money to get out to Colorado and find a house out there.
And if you would stop there, and then I'm going to ask you to go back to page 5, the second paragraph. Would you please read that paragraph?
I longed for that again, to be content and happy. Kind of sucked before because people were stalking me there. Plus, I had to go to work before. At least this time, I wouldn't have to work. I planned on finding a foreclosed house that the bank owned, and then I would repossess it so I could live there. Then I could just keep repossessing houses and cars as I needed them to make other purchases. It was going to be a good life, finally, because I worked for it. All I had to do was pick out a car to get there.
Okay, so he's describing having this dream, right? This fantasy a billionaire, have this really wonderful life where he has a $88,000 car. He's getting brand new houses. He's got these wonderful friends, right? That seems like it was pretty important to him.
Sure.
All right. Now, I want you to go to page 6. I already asked you if you recall him saying that he used force to commit this carjacking.
Correct.
Would you please read paragraph 2?
Paragraph 2?
Yes, of page 6.
I asked the woman how to start it and how to put it in drive. She showed me, and then I informed her that I was repossessing the vehicle. I have to admit that it was embarrassing and it made me nervous. I would have felt better had I could buy it or them giving it to me for reimbursement. I had to pull the keys out of the lady's hand and ask her to step out of the vehicle. Then I told her, "Shut the door, please," and she hesitantly obliged. It was awkward, but I had gotten used to it after being essentially raped on the internet and elsewhere.
Okay, so in that description, him saying he took the keys out of this lady's hands, I mean, that sounds like he's using force, does it not?
It does.
Okay. All right. Do you recall him, what do you recall him saying about him getting back to his apartment that evening? And once he's got his truck, that he's left apparently somewhere near the BMW dealership. And now he's got that truck. He's back at his apartment complex. What do you recall him telling you?
I recall him saying that he was surprised that the police were there. It sounded like he was uncertain if they were responding to the vehicle theft. And he made reference to maybe they were responding to my calls about the baby screaming. He had mentioned that he made some 911 calls and told them that there were babies screaming or something next door, and he thought maybe they would be responding to that. But then he said relatively quickly, that probably wasn't it though. They wouldn't respond to me anyway. He did describe walking up to his apartment. He had a gun at the time. And I think he mentioned going inside and kind of holding a gun. He was afraid that he was going to have to protect himself against the police at that point. He wasn't sure if there was going to be an altercation or some sort of encounter with them.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, Dr. Wood, in your recounting of it, you described it, when you documented it, as him wanting to go home to get in the bed after waiting several hours to see if someone would come and talk to him. Is that not correct?
I don't recall writing that.
Would you look at, you have your report?
I do.
Page 19.
Page 19, okay.
Yeah, it's about 2/3 of the way down.
He saw police cars with his lights on. He thought they were arresting his neighbors, doing weird stuff like knocking on the walls.
Yeah, let's start with he parked down the street to avoid confrontation.
Oh, he parked down the street to avoid a confrontation and then waited in an unlit part of the apartment complex that was overlooking his door. He was waiting to ensure that no one was inside his apartment. He reported that he had his handgun on him, which he regularly carried just in case, didn't know what I'd encounter. He went home and went to bed after waiting several hours to see if someone would come and talk to him. The next morning, the car was gone. He reportedly looked around, believing that maybe it was moved to screw with me.
Okay, and now I want you to go to Exhibit 70, page 10, third paragraph.
Third?
Yes.
I parked my truck and got out with my handgun. I put it in my jacket pocket as I walked back down to my apartment. I snuck around the back of one of the other buildings to observe if anyone was at or inside my apartment door. Sitting in the dark, I waited about 5 minutes before heading towards my apartment. I had believed a SWAT team to be outside before outside before, late at night before, and I felt threatened. I was prepared to fire on them if it became necessary.
Okay, so in that, it sounds as if he understands that the police are there shortly after he has committed a carjacking. They are by the car that he has just taken, a number of them. He mentions that he gets his gun, hides out, decides to be sneaky and sneak into his house after it's clear that they don't know he's there, and then he goes inside and he gets his gun and he's ready to shoot them, the police officers.
Correct.
Okay. Now, after those officers responded to the carjacking that he had just committed, that he writes about, and that he told you about, they took the car back, the BMW, did they not?
Correct.
That's what he told you.
That's my understanding.
And you reviewed the interview
Yes.
with that,
Yes.
the lady who was the victim of the carjacking.
Correct.
All right. Now, what he said in response to that was he was going to take something from them now that they couldn't take back.
Correct.
Them stealing the car and them taking this car back, right? The police taking this car back from him made him so angry that he wanted to go out and punish people, right?
I don't know that I would make that direct relation. He was upset about that, yes. And I think that factored into the decision. Yeah.
He just described having this grand fantasy. He's going to go out to Colorado with a brand new $88,000 car. He's got friends. He's going to smoke weed. He's going to walk the trails. He's going to eat at his favorite breakfast spot. And he's going to have all these wonderful houses and things. And then, just as he has the plan, the police come and they take the car back. And he said that made him angry, didn't he?
I believe so, yes.
He said that it made him very upset and very frustrated. That's yes or no?
I believe so. I mean, I don't have any reason to doubt you telling you that.
I'm sorry?
I'm just saying I don't recall exactly what he said, but I believe that you're saying that.
He said that it made him very frustrated and very angry, right?
Yes.
In fact, he was really disappointed.
He was disappointed, yes.
And I want you to go to Exhibit 70, page 11. I want you to read the second and third lines of that.
Of the page?
Yes. Paragraph 3, the first, second, and third lines of that sentence, that paragraph.
I went back up to my apartment after that. I was really disappointed and angry because I was counting on that car. Without a job, it was only going to make it several more months before I was completely broke.
Right. And then I'll go to page 12, please. Would you read the first and second sentences?
On the page?
Yes.
I got ready to go back out and get coffee, still in disbelief that soon turned into anger.
And then just go to the second paragraph. Begin there.
I probably yelled and shouted a lot that day, feeling trapped by these people. How would I ever be able to relocate out of the country at that point? I thought about going to Canada for political asylum, but I figured that they would follow me there as well. They had already followed me from Colorado, and nothing seemed to stop these incredibly evil people.
You can stop there. So he's describing their actions as evil to him.
Correct.
Okay. And so the thing that made him angry is that he thought people were treating him in an evil way, right?
He was upset about his treatment, yes.
He was very upset about it, very
Correct.
angry about it.
Correct.
Right? So then in response to that, he wants to punish them and treat them in a way that is equal to what he feels like he went through.
He did describe that when he mentioned the punitive actions, correct?
Okay, and we've already discussed that someone who understands that who would describe their actions as evil is someone who is able to understand that their actions are wrong.
Could you rephrase that?
We discussed that someone who would describe their actions as evil, that would be consistent with the person who understands that their actions are wrong.
It could be yes.
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 Okay. I think I want to make sure we put to bed. No testimony here that Travis Reinking didn't know what he was doing. He knew that he was killing people, right?
Yes.
He could appreciate the nature of his conduct.
Correct.
He knew that when he walked in, he pulled out that gun, he fired and shot Joe and shot Torian and shot Diebony and shot Sharita and shot Akila and shot Shantia and shot James Shaw Jr.
Objection, compound question.
Well, that he knew exactly what he was doing.
He believed he was killing the people that were targeting him, yes.
Right. Okay. You testified earlier that he received some clear command from God, which led him to go and do this.
That is what he said, yes.
But you completely ignore the fact that this happened days after the police come looking for the car that he's just committed a carjacking in, and he is built up self-reportedly as the big thing that is super important to him, right? And that he's going to punish people for.
I'm sorry, was there a question?
Yes, the question is, you're saying that he was commanded by God, but he's saying he was punishing people because the police came and got the car that he carjacked, right? That's what he said.
That was one of the things that he was upset about, yes. I think just focusing on that kind of misses the picture, the larger picture.
Page 13, would you please go to? First and second. Now, as he was angry about having the car taken back from me, he discussed that he got home later that night from dinner, and he had in his mind that his apartment was broken into, right?
Correct, he mentioned that, yes.
And so then he discussed that a password folder had been moved from one place to the next.
That's what he mentioned?
All right. I'd like you to read the first paragraph on page 13.
I went over to my table that my computer was sitting on, only to find that someone had stolen my password folder for everything that I did on the internet. Plus, also, my bathroom door was shut again, and I never shut it after I leave. Curious to see if anyone was still in there, I went and looked. When I went inside, it smelled like rank pussy. This awful smell, like some dirty prostitute had broken into my apartment and masturbated inside of it. It's probably that fucking Sophia girl again, I thought, although I couldn't be certain. All I did know was that I was under aggressive assault by a large group of people. There was no fairness involved in that.
Okay. And so the aggressive assault was that someone closed the door.
The aggressive assault is the harassment and the persecution.
Which is that Taylor Swift likes him too much.
That's not how I would describe it, no.
But having a delusion about your relationship with Taylor Swift, literally Taylor Swift, that's not uncommon.
No, I've evaluated multiple defendants who have similar delusions.
Right, and it's also very common with other celebrities, young, beautiful celebrities like her. So
Correct.
That is a very common thing. And
Sure.
those individuals, they're not going out and committing mass murders, right? That you've evaluated.
I don't believe that his delusional belief about the relationship with Taylor Swift is the reason that this happened. I think the larger issue is the persecution, the harassment, people breaking in his home, and feeling like his life is in danger. I think those are two separate things.
If it's not about Taylor Swift, then why did she come up in your testimony in the first place?
Well, I talked about how this all progressed. In the very beginning, it started with these communications that were friendly with Taylor Swift. He developed this belief about having a relationship with her. But over time, those communications were no longer friendly. They were threatening and harassing. And ultimately, she's still involved, but that relationship has changed. It's progressed to a different place that's no longer one in which he believes Taylor Swift loves him.
He wrote that he went to punish people, right? And he told you that.
Yes, he described it as punitive.
As punitive.
Correct.
Which Travis Reinking is a smart guy. He's not lacking on the IQ scale, right?
No, he's not.
He would understand the definition of the word punish or punitive.
Correct.
Yeah, to cause people pain and suffering for an action.
Correct.
Right? In order to have a retribution for an action.
Correct.
Right? That's what he was going to do.
Correct.
Right? So please read for me on page 13, the second paragraph.
I feared for how they would go, since they were acting outside the law already. How would they try to poison my food again? Would they try to sneak in again and kill me? I had hit my limit. I had to do something to stop it, since no one else would. I tried to punish them by repossessing their car, since they wouldn't make things right on their own, only for them to steal it again from me. This time, I would have to punish them by taking something they couldn't take back, some of their own lives.
He is writing that in response and in retaliation for a car that he stole being taken back for the police, even though he thinks that is wrong, that he's going to go and take some of their own lives.
That was part of what he was responding to, yes.
I'm sorry. His words are, this time I would have to punish them by taking something they couldn't take back, some of their own lives. That's what he wrote, didn't he?
Correct.
Right. He's saying, I've been punished. They need to be punished by me taking some of their lives.
Correct.
And then he did that.
Correct.
At no point in this page 13 did he say that he had been commanded by God.
He does not mention that here, no.
So he has formed in his mind the decision to go and kill people as a result and as a reaction and in retaliation for the fact that this car was taken from him. And then by the time he meets you, he's saying that he's been commanded by God.
So I think I just want to clarify that his consistent report is that this was self-defense, and that yes, he knows that he harmed people and he shot people and it described it as punitive, but in his mind he has consistently said that this was an effort to protect himself from the persecution, and certainly it was temporally related to the car being taken back, but ultimately the culmination of years of this persecution.
Well, when you say that he was acting in self-defense, he did not say to you at any point in time that anyone at that Waffle House was physically assaulting him.
No, he believed they were the agents who were involved in this persecution. And in that passage I just read, he said, I didn't know what they were going to do next. Were they going to come in and kill me? Were they going to poison me? And so this is speaking to what Mr. Reinking was responding to, this threat that he was perceiving in that moment, and going to the Waffle House, who he believed was housed with people who were a part of this, these agents that were involved that he later referred to as targets.
I understand what you're saying, but he's also a very reasonable interpretation of his words is that he is equating his actions of killing someone, killing multiple people, with that of someone who would poison someone. That he's saying that his actions are the same as poisoning another person. That is understanding that your conduct is wrong, is it not?
I mean, in the sense that he's protecting himself from, he described it as it was me or them.
He didn't say right now at this moment I am being forced to take poisonous liquid, right?
Correct.
Right. And he didn't say that when he got to that Waffle House that somebody was forcing poison down his throat, did he?
Correct.
Right. So he is saying his actions are the same as those that he believes are evil, that would poison him, that would kill him, right? He's saying that's what he did. The same as that.
Correct. I think you're trying to impose logic and reason that we possess onto someone who wasn't processing and reasoning in the same way that the rest of us are.
Well, we have to impose logic and reasoning as we make an assessment, because the jury has to make a determination about whether or not the defendant could appreciate the wrongfulness of his conduct. And you're telling me that you have looked at his words and his phrases and tried to say that he couldn't equate the two of saying I'm going to go and murder people when he's saying as in punishment and in retaliation for someone taking a car from him, which he believed was basically trying to kill him. Like, he is saying,
Judge, there's no question.
Yeah, I might do that. Let's start that all over.
Sure, Judge. I could do that again.
Well, not the whole thing. I'm trying to get to the question.
The point, though, is a person who can say, if I'm being harmed, I'm caused immense suffering because someone is doing something to me that is harming me. And I say, what I'm going to do in response is I'm going to harm someone else. That is understanding that what is happening to me is wrong and that what I am going to do is wrong. That is making a moral assessment, is it not?
Sure.
Okay, so he is making a moral assessment as he recounts the days that led up to him walking into that Waffle House and killing 4 people, is he not?
Correct.
I have no further questions, Judge.
Dr. Wood, you have that journal in front of you?
I gave it back.
Can she have the journal back, please? I want to kind of start initially where they finished. Mr. Dowdy finished with this question. Will you turn to page 13?
Okay.
You recall just a few minutes ago, he asked you to read items off of page 13.
Correct.
This is about somebody being in his house and all that. Remember that? And then do you recall Mr. Dowdy saying there's nothing mentioned in there about God making him do anything?
Correct.
Turn to page 14, the very next page. Start with the second paragraph and read the rest of it.
I'm not sure if I went to bed that night or stayed up mulling over what I should do. I remember praying to God, asking him what I should do. Sometimes I don't get an answer, but this time I did. In Morgan Freeman's voice, God told me, take your gun and go to the Waffle House. If you go now, you will only have to shoot 3 of them. Take nothing but your gun and green jacket and a couple of spare magazines. Then I want you to drive your truck there, shoot them, and then walk back to your apartment.
Keep going.
It wasn't an audible voice, but one that I imagined in my head nonetheless. It seemed to be a command from God the Father, as found in the Christian Holy Bible as the Trinity. If it was in fact God, how could I disobey a direct order? I believed in Celine and the heavens, didn't I? I believed in God. So why was it so hard for me to believe this? It was a test of my faith.
In the last paragraph.
God, if that voice wasn't you, I pray that my gun won't fire, that the firing pin would stick, the gunpowder wouldn't ignite, or the gun would jam.
Now, he asked you about the commandment by God. All we had to do was turn the page, right?
Correct.
And it's all there.
Correct.
I talked to you about the BMW, the day of the BMW. You recall that?
I do.
And he was talking about stealing the BMW, repossessing the BMW.
Correct.
Can you turn to page 9 in the journal? Just read the second paragraph out loud, please.
Only I didn't make it that far. Later the same day that I went to repossess the X6, I called an Uber ride to take me back to my truck. The man who answered was right around the corner from my apartment. He said it would only be a few minutes and then be by to pick me up. About 15 minutes later, he was outside in a silver minivan. I believed him to have an Arabic accent. Something about the man seemed nervous to me. We also went way off route, going back into Nashville before heading south. After riding with him for a while, I took him for a CIA agent. I thought to myself, I would probably be nervous riding with myself too, if I had seen everything that they would see about me. I thought about the gray aliens and Atlantis as we drove, along with the fact that I had just repossessed a $90,000 vehicle and was now hitching a ride with the CIA.
Does that sound like a person in their right mind on that day?
It does not.
If you would you turn to page 16 of your report? Are you there?
I am.
You made reference earlier that you had reviewed an audio interview of the salesperson from BMW. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
And I believe in your report that you made notes of what she said in that audio review. Is that correct?
I did.
All right. If you would, to yourself, read paragraph 4, starting with she, describe.
You want me to read that aloud?
Well, there's a number of those. I don't want you to read it out loud.
Okay.
What did she say about in that paragraph about her experience?
She described him as behaving sort of odd, a little bit strange. He wasn't disheveled. She said the only aggressive act was him taking the key from her. And she said that seemed to be like moments of clarity with him and moments of not.
The paragraph right before that is what I meant as the fourth one.
I'm sorry?
The paragraph right before that. She said it occurred to her.
Mm-hmm. Would you like me to read that?
To yourself.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
All right. In the audio interview that you considered in coming up with your opinion, what did she relay during that audio interview about her interaction with him?
She described him as very strange and said he acted like a friend of hers who had paranoid schizophrenia.
You were asked some questions about why didn't you watch the trial all day Monday and all day Tuesday. You recall that?
I do.
Do you have a job?
I do.
Do you have any other cases other than this?
Plenty.
Did you have a lot to do on Monday and Tuesday other than watch television?
I did.
You were also asked about defense attorneys making a request for evaluations. Do you recall that?
I do.
You've done over, 800 evaluations, almost 900 or something?
For the court ordered, I think it's about just under 900.
Okay, and are you familiar? Is it a practice for defense attorneys to perhaps seek evaluations of their clients?
The overwhelming majority of requests do come from the defense.
Okay, and what is that? Why do they do that?
Well, they're the ones who have interactions with the defendant. A prosecutor wouldn't have personal interactions, and the judge wouldn't have interactions to suggest that they might need this type of evaluation.
Okay, and in maybe what couple instances would they do that in? Let me ask you this. If they thought their client was not competent, do you think that they would ask the court sometime for an evaluation?
Hold on. Rephrase the question.
Okay. The state said that the defense asked the court to order Vanderbilt to do an evaluation.
Correct.
Okay. Why did they ask that?
Objection.
Doors open.
Sustained. We're not going down that road.
All right. Would it be fair to say if a defense attorney thought that there might be something mentally wrong with their client that they would ask the court to conduct an evaluation?
That is often the reason.
Okay. And it's the process in Davidson County, by contract, that if that request is made to the judge, that the court orders Vanderbilt to do it, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, it's true that a defense attorney could go out and hire whoever they wanted to do it, couldn't they?
I believe so. There's some issues about funding, but technically, yes.
Okay. But instead, they go to the court picks somebody that they believe would come up with an independent evaluation, right?
Through the contract, correct.
In other words, they want somebody who's not going to give an opinion that's biased toward the state or biased toward the defense, correct?
Correct.
And is that what you do?
Yes.
And is that what you've done close to 900 times for
Yes.
Davidson County?
Yes.
Now, you were asked a question about did the defense attorney give you items to persuade you? You remember that language?
Correct. Yes, I do.
All right. If a defense attorney has a client that they think has a mental health issue, is it normal for them to go out and investigate and try to find any evidence that may support that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Would you want to know if there's any prior history of mental illness with the person, any diagnosis?
Yes.
Any type of interaction like with the Tazewell Police Department, stuff like that?
Yes.
Okay. If there's any videos out there that might give some indications whether or not somebody's mentally ill, would that be relevant?
That would be relevant.
That's what you do. That's what the defense attorney does, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the state, they can send you anything they want to send you to, right?
Correct. We request information from both the defense and the prosecution.
Okay. And then you gather all that information, law enforcement records, interviews, you do your own interviews, whatever you do, and you come up with an independent evaluation.
Correct.
Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
There was a question about the last day that you went out to meet with Mr. Reinking. Is it fair to say he didn't have any idea what you were going to do that day when you showed up?
Yeah, I don't think he had any idea. Probably thought we would just keep talking.
Okay. So the question was asked, oh, that was the day you were going to do the malingering test. He didn't want to talk to you, right?
Correct.
But he had no idea you were going to do a malingering test, did he?
Yeah, I don't think there was any connection. And the test that I was going to administer is really more one of, it's more psychodiagnostic. It provides more information about accurate diagnosis, but it also has validity scales that we can use to assess for response style.
But he had no idea that would even possibly be coming.
There's no way he could have known. Well.
Okay, and did you, with your interaction with him, when you were talking to him, did it seem like something, this is the bad question, something was wrong with him? He was off, mentally ill?
Did I perceive something wrong with Mr. Reinking? Yes.
Okay. Now, you were asked again earlier about being provided information in an attempt to persuade you. That was the word that was used.
Correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to play at least one of the videos, the YouTube videos that was provided to her to show that what the evidence is, the types of evidence that she considers.
Judge, I believe that's one under 703. The court would have to make a decision ahead of time.
Yeah. I would have to review it for liability, trustworthiness, whether or not it generally meets rules for admission. I have no idea. The video, one of his.
Pardon me?
Is it video one of that he created?
So it's a video, it's a YouTube video. Well, there's several YouTube videos that he created that were provided to her in order for, as part of her evaluation. Obviously, the state has them as well. They're videos of him.
I guess I'd have to review it. I have no idea what it contains.
Okay. If just give me 1 second, I may have a resolution. And we have also potentially 2 other witnesses coming that have information with regard to the video as well. We'd be willing to stop at this point, and then at a break or tonight, if the court could review it and make its ruling in the morning, and then we would be in a position to perhaps play it in the morning if it's admissible at that point.
Would you need Dr. back for that, or just?
I don't need Dr. Wood back for that because she's considered the video. We can play the video. Now, if they think they need to cross-examine her, then we can stop right now about the video. Then we can stop now, and I can provide it to the court.
The observation I would make is they have not laid the foundational ground at this time under 703.
I'll review it this evening.
And I can have her come back. She's available tomorrow, too. She might be here anyway.
Be on call in the morning.
Okay. Then with reserving that issue, then that's my questions on redirect.
All right.
Yeah.
Hold on. Oh, I thought you did.
Oh, no. Just handing that back.
You free, Cross?
Yes, I have. I may.
Dr. Wood, you read about the defendant talking about the being commanded by God. You read from the journal in which he said the voice of God was Morgan Freeman's.
And then later said it wasn't so much of a voice. Yes.
But that's what he wrote. It was Morgan Freeman.
He initially wrote that, yes.
Okay. Did the fact that he described Morgan Freeman being the voice of God give you any pause in any way?
I mean, I thought it was unusual, and then I followed up with him on that during the interview, at which point he clarified it wasn't really a voice, and then described, if you have a personal relationship with God, you sometimes kind of are directed in these ways, and it's not necessarily a command so much as or not so much a voice as something that you sort of hear, not necessarily as a voice.
I want to make sure I got the timing right. You read the journal entry before you did the personal interview, or after?
Excuse me?
The handwritten journal entry.
Sure.
Did you read it before you conducted the interview?
No, but when I asked him during the interview and he said hearing a voice, a command, I think it's in the report where I said, describe the voice to me. I asked questions about it. And that's when he clarified it was not so much a voice, but sort of a direction.
We're going to have to take a recess.
Yes, sir.
Request for a recess.
Understood.
So we're going to do that at this time. Again, Mr. Jerry, just keep your thoughts to yourself and not think about anybody.
Used for the truth of the matter asserted, he said that Taylor Swift broke in my house. Nobody is saying that Taylor Swift broke in his house. It's to show his mental state and then the effect that would have on the evaluation.
And that's why I say, not only that, it's a 703 issue, mentioned foundation, which I don't believe has been established yet. Can, but that,
But is it self-authenticating since he's on the video?
I think he probably is, but I think the more important thing is under 703, there's going to be disclosure to the jury, data or facts, as you fall under that, underlying the expert's opinion that are otherwise inadmissible under the rules of evidence, which is this would be, will not necessarily be disclosed to the jury unless the court must first determine the probative value of such underlying facts or data in assisting the jury to evaluate the expert's testimony substantially outweighs its present prejudicial value, and to guard against the possibility of inadmissible underlying data, again, assuming foundations, been laid for the judge, not the jury, decides whether they are of the type reasonably relied upon by experts in that field or opinions and so on. That's what I'm saying. I think that'd be fairly easy. But that's the foundation. Then, as long as those facts or data or the type reasonably relied upon, the expert may use the information. However, otherwise inadmissible because of the danger, the jury will nevertheless consider them as substantive evidence, so on and so on, to guard against this possibility. They are not to be disclosed to the jury by the proponent unless the court first considers whether the risk and substantial the weighing process is worthwhile. Only if the court finds that the probative value substantially outweighs the prejudicial effect should the inadmissible underlying information be disclosed to the jury. That's where we are, I think, this one. The state's position is this would be unduly prejudicial to see the defendant see the video.
I'll review the video and we'll argue the laws more.
But that's the basis.
Yeah, I understand.
And just in 30 seconds, let you know where I'm coming from. The prejudicial effect, I would say what the prejudicial effect is to the state, but the probative value is significant because they ask the question in a way to make it appear as if the defense attorney is doing something to skew the result. When you say to persuade you, that gives an impression that the defense attorney is trying to skew her into something. And the video is the video. And that's why the probative value is so high on it at this point, because of the question that he asked. Now, I got a bunch more videos. All right, but I'm only asking to play one of them. And I got police reports. I could go down the whole 9 yards with this thing based on that question that he asked.
Yeah.
So that's where we're coming from.
Anything else in the memo?
Not a pump truck.
The voice of God was Morgan Freeman's.
No, I believe that was in the journal only.
Okay. So when you're saying that you asked him follow-up questions about the voice, it was not because you had heard him say Morgan Freeman.
Right. It's just a standard procedure in getting an account of an incident to ask follow-up questions like, tell me more about the voice. What did it say? What did it sound like? That kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. So back to my very initial question, as he's written here, that the voice that gave him the command was Morgan Freeman's. Did that give you any pause?
I did think it was unusual, yes.
Okay. Now, with regard to the commands that he received from God, those shifted frequently as you spoke with him, did they not?
I don't recall that.
Okay. Well, I think we've already kind of hit one topic. He didn't tell you that God spoke in the voice of Morgan Freeman, but he wrote that God spoke in the voice of Morgan Freeman. That is not consistent.
Sure.
He also said it wasn't actually an audible voice.
Yeah, at different times he said it was like a voice, not an audible voice. It was more of a command. Yeah.
More of a command?
Yeah, so he described that, sometimes the way he characterized it is when you have a relationship with God, sometimes you sort of feel compelled to do things or pushed to do things or feel this direction or hear this direction that he was characterizing as a voice or an order, but was sort of situating it in that way.
It sounds like you're describing just a thought, like he thought he should do something.
It could be, yeah.
Okay.
It's similar.
And he was not consistent with you when he described what God had commanded him to do exactly.
I don't recall inconsistencies in that regard.
Well, didn't he tell you that God had commanded him to shoot only 3 people?
Well, he said, now I might be mixing it up, but I remember the direction mentioning 3 people, but I don't remember exactly what the word he said.
Okay. Well,
but that was also mentioned in the journal.
Right. You see page 42. I guess midway through the second paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Would you look at that and tell me if you're able to refresh your recollection as to what he told you about what God commanded him as to how many people he had to shoot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it says you only have to shoot 3 people.
Right. And actually, if you go a little bit further, he also told you that God didn't even make it clear that he had to kill people.
Well, he said that he later considered it and said, there's other meanings of shoot. He could have meant shoot a camera and take pictures of them, or shoot a paintball gun, and clarified these are not things that I thought about until afterward, but it's possible I misinterpreted it.
Okay, so there's 2 parts there. One, as he's telling you about what he did, he is expressing that he had some doubts about the clarity of God's command to him, right?
Yes, that's why I talked about him feeling very conflicted about this, wanting to make sure. I don't want to do this if it's wrong. I want to make sure this is what I'm supposed to do.
And also that he thought he could have just used a paintball gun.
After the fact, he said, that's not something I considered at the time, but maybe I could have done that instead.
Or a camera.
He said it's possible he meant shoot with a camera.
Obviously, if Travis Reinking had taken his camera to the Waffle House, we wouldn't have anybody dead today, would we?
We would not be here today. That's exactly right.
Right. So he, as he expressed to you the command from God, couldn't even tell you when you say it was clear, that it was clear to him.
Well, I mean, I think that what you're pulling out is his expressing this doubt. I think from the beginning he had doubt about, is this possibly what he's asking me to do? Is this really what I'm being asked to do? And I think the whole process of him sort of grappling with this and finding the messages and getting the authentication and the confirmation that that's what he's supposed to do really reflects that. I think that after the fact he did some pondering, some considering, maybe it meant something different. That's not uncommon. People oftentimes reflect back on what they've done and could have done differently. I don't think that's unusual or inconsistent at all for him to think about that.
Okay, so Travis Reinking is aware that he is committing criminal actions before, that he's going to punish them and that he's going to inflict pain and suffering before he gets to the Waffle House. Then after he leaves the Waffle House, he is reflecting and believes that potentially he has committed immoral acts that are illegal and that he shouldn't have done, but only at the moment that he is killing these people does he not know it's wrong. Is that what you're telling us?
He does not perceive these actions as illegal. He has consistently conceptualized this as self-defense. And in his mind, which is why he provided the journal that characterized this as self-defense and wanted me to provide it to the judge and say, this is the basis for this. This is self-defense. He believed in his mind that there was no way that anyone who heard about this happening could possibly convict him because it was self-defense.
And in that same paragraph that I was asking you to look at, there is a line there in which he told you that he felt like handing them a gun for them to defend themselves, end quote. That's what he told you.
Correct. Before that, he was saying it felt wrong for me to have a weapon and them not. However, I'd been the target of this persecution. They'd had these extremely sophisticated weapons for so long. And then after that, he goes on to say, what was I supposed to do? I don't have a prison to detain them. I'd called the police. I can't do that. And so that was sort of his reasoning in that moment. That is something that he said, but I think you have to consider it within all of the information.
Right. It is something that he said, what you're saying is he told you he wanted to arm these innocent people because what he was doing, so that they could defend themselves against him, but he was acting in self-defense.
Again, he does not perceive them as innocent people. He perceived these as targets, the agents who were furthering this persecution of him by which he was protecting himself. He perceived in that moment that it was an uneven match in the ways of why he said, I could have provided them a weapon, but also sort of talked about in the past that was incongruent with what he had experienced. I think it's also inconsistent with later things that he said when he talked about, shooting them in certain ways. He wanted it to be more humane than what they had done to him. And so I think you just have to consider all of this together.
You don't recall him saying when he was shooting, when he described in the journal shooting Torian Sonderland, that he shot him in a way to cause him to suffer and to give him the opportunity to get right with God, cause him to suffer like Travis Reinking, had suffered?
I think it said the opposite of that. I think that he wanted to be more humane and not cause them to suffer in the same way that he had.
Yeah, okay. You talked about, defense attorney asked you whether or not Travis Reinking appeared to be in his right mind when he committed a carjacking. I guess this should be. Oh, I'm sorry. As he's riding back from getting his truck.
No, I asked if he seemed to be in his right mind when she was interviewing him.
Fair enough. When what's the name of the malingering test that you were going to give Travis Reinking?
Oh, the one that I was going to administer. It's the MMPI-2RF.
Okay. And you said that he would have no way to know.
I don't think there's any way that he could have, that I was going to administer that, no.
Unless somebody told him.
I don't know who could have told him.
Did you talk to his attorney about it?
No.
Okay.
I don't regularly keep in touch with the attorneys during the course of the evaluation about what I'm doing.
But in this case, you did.
I received communication from him, yes.
Right.
But I don't tell them that this is what I'm going to do or these are the tests that I'm going to administer. That is not standard.
Okay. You were asked on redirect whether Travis Reinking believed that you were part of the conspiracy also.
Correct.
And you're saying that he did.
There was a comment that he made, I believe it was in the Journal, and I know he said it to his attorney, about there was something that I did, I think it was with my tongue or with my mouth during the interview, that he recalled, I think, his sister doing a long time ago, and mentioned that he had concerns that I was sort of, that maybe linked me to this larger conspiracy. Yes.
And you just said, or something he told his attorney, as that was consistent with you being a part of the conspiracy. So you're telling us in your testimony that he is that you are in communication with his attorney at that time.
That was in the documents that he provided to me. Okay. But I believe it was also written in the Journal.
All right. Fair enough. And Travis Reinking also believed that the conspiracy was even bigger or broader, right? There were other individuals, not just these Waffle House people who might have been a part of it. The
Correct.
People who were in the Waffle House, rather.
Correct.
But when he was finally arrested, he completely complied.
Sure.
I mean, if you had been listening to the testimony over the last 2 days, you would have heard that there was an instance where he had to go to the hospital and have a catheter stuck up the urethra of his penis. Wasn't a very pleasant experience, as it appeared from the witness describing it. And they said he never once attempted to not comply. Shouldn't, if he believes everyone's a part of this conspiracy, not be unwilling to comply with the actual government agents who have the guns, who actually want to detain him?
It's possible, yeah. But he's consistently been described as calm and cooperative throughout all the records that I've read, all the interactions with him, with the exception of these few times when the police responded to the offense itself. But that's his typical presentation. Yeah,
and except for April 22nd, 2018, at about 3:20 in the morning, in which he is absolutely not calm, cooperative, or tranquil or peaceful or anything.
Objection, which is what she said.
You talked about back to the issue of the command, the very, very clear, extremely specific command he received. On redirect, defense counsel asked you to read some more of Exhibit 70, and I'm going to ask you to do the same, but a little bit more. I want you to start at page 16, and just please read until I tell you to stop, if you don't mind.
Beginning at the top?
Just let me catch up to it, because I need to see if it's on the same matter that I redirected. So I'm not sure if it's the same matter or a different issue. We're on page 16.
It's on the same page, so it's a decent start.
It's not. That was 14 that she read.
I thought it was 16.
No, it's 14 because they wrote 13 as the next page.
Well, he went into 15 also, and he's continuing to
point out to him where you're going to see, where you're trying to see.
Okay.
Cool.
Your approach, so please do so.
Dr. Wood, would you please go to page 16 of Exhibit 70?
Sure.
And please begin reading.
I had even told them about what I had planned on, since I had spoken it in my apartment so that they could hear me.
Your Honor, if I may, that's not what the court referenced in the record.
Yeah, not the first sentence. Start.
Please start at the third sentence. When I repossessed is how it begins.
Okay, when I...
Good one.
Okay.
Oh,
When I repossessed the BMW, I had told them that's what I had planned on going to the Waffle House in my area with lethal intent this time. The one where I assumed they put actual bullshit in my food south of my apartment at the location. Then I planned on visiting the one to my house to the north. That was much closer. I said, if they value their lives, they will close up for the night before I get there. This would probably get them fired from their cover jobs, but I saw that as fair since they had gotten me fired from my work.
you can
going.
continue.
I gave them several hours notice that if nobody was at those two locations, then I would just go home and go to bed. That, or they would have to accept the consequences for threatening my life and well-being. Keep going.
Yes.
That's when several hours later, I walked outside into the open air after that. I planned on going to the Waffle House to the north first to make sure that it had closed. Walking to my truck, essentially naked with a gun, felt terrifying. I didn't know if I would be killed immediately when I walked outside, since I had told them what I would be doing. At this point, I didn't care anymore. My life was the last thing they could take from me at that point. They had already robbed me of all my dignity, amongst other things. Continue.
I don't know, when's the stopping point on this?
Yeah, I thought we were talking about page 16. How far are we going?
Well, Judge, this is a narrative that he's giving. It's all straight narrative form. It's not a break in this topic or discussion. I think everyone at this point in time.
Outside the rules at this point.
Yeah, I think we've heard enough.
Sorry, Judge. 1 second. Dr. Wood, you just testified here on recross that Travis Reinking he reported that he was only commanded by God to kill 3 people, but you do know he killed way more people than that, or he shot way more people than that.
Correct.
Right. And you also are aware that he described how he felt about that afterwards using terms that suggested that he knew it was wrong.
He described feeling unclean and unholy. Yes.
Those are my questions.
Anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Dr. Wood, that concludes your testimony.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's yours.
Did you get the report back?
Yeah.
The journal, I mean. Thank you, Doctor. All your next.
Judge, may we approach briefly?
The next witness is Dr. Eisen, another forensic psychologist. And it's my understanding from the representations and agreed upon by both sides and her testimony will be quite lengthy, and there's no way we're going to get it in within the next 55 minutes. I certainly don't want to get in a position to try and push them along to try and get it in before 6 o'clock, and at the same time, I have no desire whatsoever to bifurcate for
Okay, so there is one more section to her testimony that we're going to watch. In this, they're going to show some of the videos that the attorneys were discussing with the judge that we previously heard.
Good morning, Dr. Wood.
Good morning.
Yesterday, when you testified, I believe you referenced that you had been supplied some YouTube videos that you reviewed as part of your evaluation in this case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was one of those YouTube videos entitled "Somebody Broke Into My Apartment"?
Yes.
And did you review that?
I did.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to play that YouTube video.
All right, you may.
Alright, so I just got back from Starbucks. I had run up in my truck because I wanted to test my truck out. I found what was making the rattling noise inside of the wheel, and I took off the hubcap earlier, and there's this metal piece in there that protects the axle bolt or something. So it had jiggled off or something, supposedly. So I took a wrench, and I beat it back on there so it was tight again, and I put the hubcap back on. And since then it hasn't been making any noise. But I went to Starbucks, and I got a Starbucks thing, and I come back to the apartment here, and then that's the thing is these people just magically show up, and it's an art of deception. They're doing this for some reason because it hasn't been the first time. So for some reason, my cousin Chris just happens to show up here while I'm outside. The off chance that I'm outside just when he decides to pull up. I'm looking at my truck. I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do to my truck, in the future. I want to black some stuff out on it. I want to change the running boards, black the running boards out. I'm going to get under it, repaint the underbody, put underbody coating on the underside of it. I need to redo the rocker panels and everything like that. And so I'm talking about all the stuff I want to do to my truck. And then Chris pulls up, my cousin Chris, and I had gone down to his place the other day, to see him. And so it's like, well, that's weird, that this guy just happens to show up here, and he said he had been out voting with some people someplace or something like that. So I don't know how he would have known that I went there, or anything like that. But anyway, that's coincidence. I'll just write that off as coincidence. So anyway, I started talking to Chris, and he asked me how it's going and everything like that. And I said, it's going all right. There's just some strange things that have been happening. And then I talked to him about my truck and everything, and he asked questions about the truck, and I talked to him about, his life and how's it going and how it feels to be out of the Marines and everything like that. But then when I started talking to him about, what had been going on, about this internet stuff, and how my parents had me taken to a mental institution for looking for Taylor Swift. Because a long time ago, I had read some stuff on the internet, and it made me think that she was uptown. So I was like, I'll just go look uptown and see if she's up there, And I asked my mom to go with me because I was like, I don't want to be bored just playing this game, So I'll have someone go with me, and they can help me, find this person. And so I asked my mom to go. Next thing I know, we're out front of CVS, and the police are pulling up. This guy comes out from ERS, the police pull up, and I'm being arrested and everything, and so I tell Chris about that whole story, and then he doesn't ask a single question. And if you knew this, he's my cousin, so I've known him since we were little, and so it's like, if you knew who Chris was, Chris would ask questions about what had been going on. He didn't ask a single question about the internet hacking, which is really strange for this person. If you knew this person, that's the thing, is he asks questions about everything else because Chris is just a curious guy, But then when it came to the internet stuff, he didn't say one thing. He didn't ask one question, which is suspicious. And then I come back up to my apartment, and this is why I'm angry right now. I come back up to my apartment, you know, and this is on my dad's property. My dad owns this property, you know, but this is where I reside. You know, this is where all my stuff is. My stuff's all right here. You know, so this is my living quarters. This is where I live. This is where I reside. No one can come in here. The door is locked. There's nothing saying anyone can come in here. And so, anyway, I come in here, I come into my bathroom, and I notice in my bathroom that the toilet seat is up. The toilet seat is up on my toilet. And so, like, I have, like, really, really high, spatial awareness. Like, I took a test at the community college in my area, and I can either find it if I have the results here still, or I can go to the community college and get the results, because I took a test there, a placement test, and I scored 99 percentile, you know, on this test that they had for spatial awareness, and they said it was the second highest testing that they'd ever seen for that at that school, when 18,000 people go there per year, you know, per semester. And so it's a really high score, and like, I haven't put my toilet seat up. I know for a fact that this toilet seat was down. I know for a fact that the toilet seat was down. I never put my toilet seat up because I don't like it messing up my toilet. If you stand up and you piss into your toilet, water splashes and the stuff goes everywhere, you know, it makes a mess. So I always leave the seat down. I always sit down to pee or do anything. I never lift my toilet seat up. And yet this is what's happened. And then before, you know, I have come in here and the door will be cracked like that. You know, it's not all the way shut, it's not all the way open. I always leave it all the way open, or I leave it all the way shut. I never leave it cracked open. I never do that. And I know for a fact, you know, that I didn't leave it that way. So somebody has been coming in here. And then, like I said to my dad the other day, there was fingerprints on the sides of my laptop. There's fingerprints on the sides. I never open the lid that way. When I open the lid of my laptop, I always grab it here and open it, you know? And then if I carry it like this, you know, from the bottom. My fingers are never like that. I always carry it like this, but somebody did, because there's fingerprints, 4 fingerprints across the top of the lid like that. Then I open up, so that's suspicious, you know. I think that's suspicious that I see these fingerprints on there. Then I open the lid of my computer. You know, I type in my passwords and everything because it's password protected. No one can be on this. This is my password stuff. I type in my passwords and everything, and that's the thing, is like I keep long passwords that no one can crack, you know, that I know of. And then I keep them in a file here. So someone would have had to go on to the file, got my passwords, then got my computer, got on my computer, and then I see that there's been files that have been manipulated on my computer. One of the file names had been shortened probably by accident. They probably highlighted some of it and then deleted some of it because it was like half of it was there now. And I didn't do it. I don't think that I did it, you know, because I don't do stuff like that. And if I did, I would have noticed. But then, so then there's these notes. That was in my notes, you know, the notes that I keep, my journals that I keep on my computer. It's labeled under journals. And I keep these notes in there, you know, to keep track of all this stuff that's been happening to me. So I go into these entries, you know, and one of them's been modified, and then I try to find another journal that talks about my dad or something like that. Another entry, and the entry's gone. Like, I can't find a certain entry that I wrote one time when I was out in Colorado. It just happens to disappear, you know, like it's gone or got deleted or whatever. You know, it's like, why is somebody coming in my apartment and doing this stuff? You know, this is illegal. Why is somebody getting on my private property like that? Why is someone going to my bathroom? And that's the thing, is I know for a fact that I never lift the toilet seat. I never put the toilet seat up. I never do that. It's always down. I mean, yeah, okay, maybe once in a while, you know, if I've been drinking or something like that, I don't know, you know, maybe I'll lift it up then, you know, just because I don't know why. But I know for a fact, before I left here today, just to go to Starbucks, that was down. And the reason I know that is because I peed right before I left. And I sat down. I didn't ever do that. Somebody came in here and did that. And so it aggravates me to no end that these people are doing this stuff, you know. This is my private space. No one's allowed in here. You know, and that's the crazy thing, is they think that they can do this. And, oh wow, I don't even know where to begin with all this stuff. Because then I watch these videos, you know, on YouTube about, oh, you know, some Julia Roberts person or something, some psychopath like breaks into her house and she's hiding in her closet because she's afraid of like this person that's doing this stuff. And it's like, look at these people. They're afraid, and yet they expect me not to be. Like, look, they're coming in here, they're doing this stuff in my apartment, and then I'm not supposed to be scared? Like, oh, I'm just supposed to accept that this happens? This is insane. These people are insane. I want this to stop. This is ridiculous. And I'm tired of getting worked up, and I don't know why I have to be mean to people or call people names in order to get them to fuck off. You know, that's the only word I can use. Is like, look, I don't want you around anymore. I never did. Like, I didn't ever ask anybody into my apartment. I've never done that. I don't want them anywhere near here. And, dude, this is criminal. I mean, this whole thing is criminal, what these people are doing to me. And then they blow it off like it's just some game and I'm just supposed to be okay with it when they're not even okay with this stuff. It's stupid. You know, it's probably because, you know, it's Taylor Swift, you know, she wants to pretend like she's a dude, she's a transvestite or whatever. I don't care. Like, if that's what she wants to do, that's what I said earlier, you know, put on a pair of pants then, or whatever you want to wear, you know, put on boy clothes, you know, get on the internet and tell everyone you're a fucking guy, then do that. You know, I don't care. Whatever you want to do. It's not my problem. Why are these people breaking into my apartment, you know, flipping the toilet seat up like there's some guy in here using it? Like, stop doing that. If you want to tell people about that, then go tell them, you know. Go publicize it yourself. What the fuck? Why are you doing this to me? It's so dumb. And that's the whole thing, is they keep pushing this stuff on me, like, oh, this gayness or like transsexual stuff, and it's like, what the fuck, you know, none of this makes sense, you know, none of this sticks to me, and they don't see that. Like, no, like, I am not that, you know, if she's that, that's fine, but stop projecting your garbage onto me, you know, accept what you are. If you want to be a dude, if you want to leave the toilet seat up, then do that, you know. If you want to be a dude and you want to leave the toilet seat up, then do that in your own fucking apartment. Dress like a man or whatever on your own fucking time. Go dress like a guy wherever you fucking go or whatever, you know? And tell people that if you want to tell them that. But don't be doing this shit to me. This shit's fucking crazy. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's the thing, is there are these sexist people, you know? I saw this thing the other day when I was going through Pekin, and it was like, silly boys, you know, girls drive big trucks. And it was right after I bought my truck, you know, so is that a coincidence? I don't know. These people just come up with these bumper stickers just to annoy me. You know, like I said, I think part of the community is doing this, so I won't be surprised if someone went out, slapped this bumper sticker on their truck to try to make me feel that way, you know? But that's insane. These people are psychopaths, and they're insane. And you know what? Like, trucks aren't just for boys or girls, okay? Silly boys, trucks are for girls. No, they're not. They're for everyone. Trucks are for everyone, retard, okay? This is stupid. This is sexist, and it's wrong to be that way. And secondly, if you want to be a guy, that's fine, okay? You want to be a guy, you want to pretend to be a guy or whatever, then do that. But when you come into my apartment and do this shit, okay, for one, guys aren't criminals. All guys are not criminals, you feminist Nazi. And when you come in here and do this stuff, that just tells me you're a fucking criminal, that you believe guys are criminals, and that's wrong. Like, all guys aren't criminals, you know? And I don't like you because of the way you portray men. You're sick. I don't want anything to do with people like that.
Your Honor, I moved the video into evidence. All right. And I'll have to supply a thumb drive with just that single video on that. That's all I have.
Remember, the jury, let me explain something to you very clearly. that driver, that video that you just saw was introduced to give you insight and some understanding of the type of information relied upon by Dr. Wood to form her opinions. You can only consider it for that purpose as to whether or not it's the type of information that she, give it what weight you want to in terms of how she utilized it to form her opinions. You cannot independently look at that video and make any substantive decisions as to his mental state, Mr. Reinking's mental state, the truth of what he was talking about, or anything else. It is solely limited as to whether or not it was valid information, or whether or not it was valid information. Give it what weight you want in terms of Dr. Wood's use of it in forming the opinions that she did. All right? All right.
You want to ask some questions?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to clarify that before we went any further.
Dr. Wood, the video that we just observed, that behavior is consistent with schizophrenia.
It can be, yes.
It can be?
Yes, that paranoia, that fast rate of speech, the inaccurate interpretations of things, yes.
Okay. So it's consistent with individuals just have schizophrenia. That's just normal behavior for a schizophrenic.
It can be, yes.
Okay. And I think we've established that most schizophrenics are not out committing mass murder, right?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. And the behavior that we observed, it seemed, according to his own recount, the defendant was saying that those things made him angry.
Yes, he did say that.
Right. Okay. He didn't say in that video it made him afraid. Just said, I'm angry.
I think at one point he did say he was afraid. Maybe I'm misremembering, but...
Right. Well, maybe. He talked about... And do you recall when this video was shot?
I was told it was August or September of 2017.
Okay. And just so we're clear, it's not abnormal for an individual, just any person, to post videos of themselves direct to camera on YouTube or social media, right? That's a normal thing.
I understand a lot of people do that, yes.
And not all of them have schizophrenia.
No.
And not all of them go out and commit mass murder.
Very few people do.
Right. Okay. And so this video, you said you were told was shot between August and September of 2017?
Correct.
All right. And his chief concerns in the video appeared to be that the toilet seat was left up.
He was concerned that someone had clearly been in his apartment, which was evidenced by the toilet seat being left up, the fingerprints on the laptop.
And a password folder being moved.
I don't believe that was mentioned. I think it was the fingerprints on the laptop.
He mentioned a folder.
I don't recall that in that video we just watched.
When you spoke to him in May of 2018, the concerns that he told you that continued at that time were toilet seat, password folder, things like that.
Yeah, at that night, there was a smell in the apartment, and that was when he mentioned the password folder or some document from his computer, yes.
Right, so the same kinds of concerns.
Similar concerns, yes.
All right, not an escalation of concerns, the same kinds of concerns.
They were similar concerns, correct.
Right. Okay. He also, and there was a point in the video where he says, I never leave the toilet seat up. And there was a long pause. He says, well, unless I've been drinking. When you talked to him, there was a concern that he had an alcohol abuse disorder, right?
Yes, he has a history of drinking heavily.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you discuss with him whether or not he was drinking on the night of April 22nd, 2018?
I believe I did, yes.
Okay. And did you clearly verify that he had not been drinking?
I mean, by asking him, yes.
So, but you didn't review any records which may have confirmed or I guess either way that he wasn't drinking that night?
To my knowledge, there was no record of that. There was no testing that was completed.
Well, there was testimony in this trial that there was a blood draw taken the day after he was arrested.
That was never provided to me.
Well, it was provided at the very least in the testimony within this trial.
Correct.
Okay, so you didn't go and verify to look at the blood draw to see if maybe he had been drinking.
I did not know there was one.
There was also records that you reviewed that showed that he had elevated liver enzymes.
Correct, that was mentioned in his records.
Okay, and elevated liver enzymes could be consistent with somebody who has been drinking alcohol.
It could be.
Okay, so he had to be treated for that, right?
I don't know.
That was within your report. Those are the records that you said you reviewed.
Yes, that was mentioned in the report.
And
yes.
you noted it in your report that he had to be treated for elevated liver enzymes.
I don't know what the treatment for that is.
Well, okay, so the point is, he told you that he had a history of drinking heavily, right?
Correct.
He told you reviewed video which he's clearly showing that he drinks heavily, right? Such that he's leaving the toilet seat up and things like that. And then he received treatment which could be consistent with someone who has alcohol, who has been drinking heavily, and you didn't go and try to review or confirm one way or another whether or not he was actually drunk on the night of April 22nd, 2018.
I do try to confirm those things by requesting information from a variety of sources, which I would assume if that was accessible to either the defense or the prosecution, it would have been provided to me.
But as you sit on the witness stand here today, you cannot tell this jury one way or the other whether for sure Travis Reinking was drunk or had been drinking on the night of April 22nd, 2018.
I cannot verify that, no.
He also mentioned that he had some issues with being considered gay or transsexual.
He did talk about that in the video, yes.
That was something that bothered him, the fact that he might be considered gay or transsexual.
Yeah, it sounded as though other people might imply that, and that was upsetting to him.
And in fact, one of the things that he was initially, when he presented after being arrested at the sheriff's office, one of the things they discussed with him was whether or not he had a sexual sadism disorder, an abolitionistic disorder, and transvestic disorder. They called those the rule out diagnoses.
You're talking about the jail records here in Davidson County?
Yes.
Yes, they did mention those.
So there was some concern by someone who that he may have a psychological disorders associated with being a transsexual, being an exhibitionist, and having sexual sadism.
Yes, that was a concern, but my opinion is that was a misinterpretation of prior events.
Okay, but what is sexual sadism?
Usually when we talk about sexual sadism, masochism, it's sexual pleasure by inflicting or experiencing pain.
Inflicting pain on others?
Yes.
Okay. And exhibitionistic disorder?
That was referring to sort of getting pleasure out of exposing oneself to other people.
So being naked in front of other people?
Correct.
Okay. And transvestic disorder?
I'm not quite familiar with that term. I assume that's referring to potentially he was grappling with being transgender, but I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, and it sounds like being considered transgender made him very angry or bothered.
Potentially. I think that what the concern was in his records, there were times where he was grappling with his sexuality. And I think that in that video, it talked about Taylor Swift potentially posing as a man, and he seemed to suggest that other people were suggesting that of him.
Okay. And just to put a complete button on this, you said sexual sadism disorder is one where you derive pleasure from causing pain to others.
Correct.
April 22nd, Travis Reinking killed 4 people, maimed 2 others, and shot and injured 2 others. Right? He caused considerable pain on that day.
That is my understanding, yes.
All right. And exhibitionistic disorder, which you have testified, is someone who enjoys showing their nude body to others, right? On April 22nd, 2018, he exposed himself to others as he was causing significant pain to them. Is that right?
Correct. He was virtually naked at the time of the offense.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Dr. Wood, you said earlier, I think just on this question, that the state had opportunity to provide you with whatever they wanted to provide you with, and they did provide you with certain information. Isn't that correct?
They did, yes.
And you heard earlier, you heard like a question that at some point in this trial there was evidence of a urine screen taken from Mr. Reinking shortly after his arrest. You recall that?
He did mention that, yes.
Okay. During the past 4 years, at any point in time, has the state ever provided you those test results that would indicate whether or not there was alcohol in the system on around April 22nd, 2018?
I have never seen those, no.
Anything else?
1 second.
County Sheriff's Office, which included how he was treated.
Your Honor, that's not the screen.
Well,
The Davidson County Sheriff's Office.
Hold on, let me finish the question. Don't answer it until we get the objection.
which would include certain records related to his medical treatment while he was in custody. Did you not?
We received his.
Hold on.
The Davidson County.
Your Honor, this is testimony.
Let's have one attorney at a time and let that attorney finish, and then I'll allow you to say anything you want. We're not going to get into an argument.
Okay, they're just going to go on about what testimony and evidence further is going to be admitted. I do find it interesting sometimes to listen through those, as they can get pretty heated between the attorneys and even the judge, and hearing the judge get fed up with them. So that video of Travis was pretty telling in his, as they stated, his paranoia state. So I definitely will be dissecting that video for my curated version of this case. Tomorrow we will finish up this case. We will go through the closing statements and the verdict as well. So I hope to see you guys then. I super appreciate everyone's input today and insights. And I hope to see you guys tomorrow. We'll be back at 1 p.m. EST. See you then.